Chapter 91. Looking at the backs of the servant and the yellow-robed maid, Ning Shu's eyes flashed with deep thought. She didn't have time to take a breath, and immediately turned to walk towards the stables. Stop. Who are you? The people of the third prince's residence were extremely vigilant. Before she could get close to the stables, she was stopped by the guards. Ning Shu took out the waist token of the Prince of Nanping's residence and smiled. I'm from the Prince of Nanping's residence. It's like this. Our residence's carriage was on the way to the banquet. When it passed by the 7-mile bridge, it was bumped by a rock on the bridge, and the axle of the carriage became loose. If it isn't repaired in time, I'm afraid there will be an accident on the way back. That would be a great disaster. Therefore, I have to trouble your residence. I wonder if you can give us one of your carriages to use, or ask your coachman to help us repair the axle. Hearing her words and the fact that it was related to the safety of the Prince of Nanping's residence, the guard hurriedly said, Wait here. I'll go and report to the steward. Ning Shu put away the waist token and said with a smile, No problem. I'll wait here. She was from the Prince of Nanping's residence and had a legitimate reason. The guards couldn't stop her and could only let her wait here. Ning Shu waited for a while and seemed to feel a little bored. She casually walked around and said, Are those carriages from your residence? No wonder my prince said that among the princes in the palace, only the third prince's bearing is the most elegant and proud. Even the carriage is so luxurious. I've really learned something today. The guards looked at her coldly and didn't say anything. Ning Shu smiled and didn't care. Soon, the guard came back with the order and said, The steward has agreed. We'll help you repair the carriage. You're not allowed to run around. Ning Shu hurriedly thanked them. Then I'll have to thank you, big brothers. It was very troublesome to repair the axle. The wheels had to be removed and the bottom of the carriage supported. 5 or 6 people had to work together. Ning Shu watched from the side for a while and wanted to help. However, she was more of a hindrance and was chased away by the guards. She smiled apologetically and obediently stayed away. No one noticed that she had quietly approached the carriages belonging to the third prince's mansion and was carefully observing the surroundings. She lifted a corner of the curtain, but didn't discover anything. However, when she approached one of the carriages, the tip of her nose twitched and she vaguely smelled a special fragrance. The afterglow of the evening had faded, and the lanterns had just been lit. With the help of the moonlight and lamplight, she glanced around sharply, squatted down, and touched the wheel. She picked up a dried petal and put it into her sleeve. Soon, she stood in the distance as if nothing had happened. There are 2 clues. First, according to a new maidservant in this mansion, when the maidservants of the third prince's mansion fall ill, they will be sent to a manor outside the city to recuperate. Therefore, this should be Xiao Yunyan's excuse to cover up the maidservant's death. Second, if he wants to send the sick maidservant out of the city, he must use a carriage. Therefore, I just went to investigate the situation of the carriages in his mansion. On one of the wheels of one of the carriages, I found a type of flower called acacia. This flower's fragrance is very strong and won't dissipate for a few days. However, because the fragrance of acacia is too overbearing, it destroys the elegance of the carriage. Moreover, the conditions for planting the flower are very strict, so it is not commonly seen. The banquet had ended. The princes and young masters were following Xiao Yunyan to admire the flowers under the moon. It was a very elegant scene. Behind the crowd, Ning Shu carefully supported Xiahou Qingzhuang at the back and quietly reported the situation she had just scouted. Xiahou Qing said, It is used in the memorial hall to cover up the strong smell of corpses. It is also occasionally used in the prison of the Ministry of Justice when they are fishing corpses out of the river. Ning Shu nodded. Yes. I guess that Xiao Yunyan is most likely using this type of flower to cover up the smell left behind by the patient on the carriage. Chapter 92. In case the walls had ears, Ning Shu simply reported a few words and then kept quiet, continuing to support Xiahou Qing, acting like a responsible eunuch. Xiao Yuni had drunk a lot of wine just now and was half drunk and half sober. He leaned against the flower corridor to sober himself up, and saw that familiar-looking eunuch supporting Xiahou Qing slowly walking towards him. A fiery red cotton fell on his head, and he raised his hand to pick it up, not knowing that there was another one on his shoulder. Under the moonlight, his face was like the best porcelain, androgynous and delicate. It made people think of Mr. Tan's joke just now. If he was a woman, he would definitely be a rare beauty. Seeing Xiao Yuni, Ning Shu bowed politely, and was about to walk past him when Xiao Yuni suddenly spoke up. She heard Xiao Yuni ask, "Your name is Yan Gui?" Ning Shu immediately said in fear, "Yes, this servant Yan Gui greets your highness." Xiao Yuni used his gaze to trace the shape of her eyes and murmured, "Your eyes are so similar to hers." Similar to who? Xiao Yunyan and the rest had been chatting in front for a long time, but they did not see Xiao Yuni and Xia Hoqing following them. So they turned back to look for them and vaguely heard this sentence. Feeling Xiao Yunyan's suspicious gaze, Ning Shu's breathing stopped. Guillermo had helped her completely change her appearance, but he did not prevent her eyes from being recognized. This part could not be changed. Others might not be able to recognize her, but Xiao Yuni was too familiar with her. Xiao Yuni smiled. "Royal brother, you heard wrong. I said that this Yangui eunuch's eyes are very similar to the eyes of a fox I raised in the past. They are both sharp and intelligent. It's a pity that my fox ran away secretly one day, and I couldn't find it anymore. Let me see, let me see." Xiao Yunsu was usually frivolous. At this time he also came up to Ning Shu and looked her up and down. He chuckled and said, "This eunuch's eyes are really good. They are even more beautiful than the courtesans of 100 Fragrances house." As expected, Mr. Xiaoho knows how to teach people. In the current dynasty, there were many unmarried young masters. In order to relieve their desires and not affect their future marriage, it was not uncommon for their mansions to raise a few beautiful male prostitutes. Instead, it was regarded as a beautiful story. Xia Hoqing walked in front of Ning Shu without batting an eyelid and said casually, "Your Sixth Highness has taken a fancy to this attendant of mine?" At this moment, Xiao Yuni's eyes were a little drunk, as if he was waking up from a dream. He vaguely remembered that not long ago outside the Phoenix Algae Palace, he had knelt for so long. When Shu finally came out safe and sound, she had chased after Xia Hoqing before she could say anything to him. A wave of burning resentment rose in his heart, and he laughed coldly. "If I said yes, would Mr. Xiaoho be willing to give up his treasure?" Young Master Tan and the others heard the commotion, and also came over to join in the fun. "Haha, just now when I asked when the two highnesses would get married, you both fooled me. I didn't expect that you would take a fancy to the same eunuch. This is difficult. There is only one person, but there are two highnesses. What should we do?" "It's not difficult," Xia Hoqing said as if nothing had happened. "Your Highness just said that you took a fancy to her eyes. Then just dig out her eyes and take her away. Leave her behind." The content of his words was very cold, but his expression was indifferent. The bystanders all thought that he was joking, so they jeered. "Then wouldn't she be ugly?" Xia Hoqing said carelessly. "In any case, I can't see. What does it matter if she is ugly or not?" The suspicion just now was attracted by Xia Hoqing's interruption. Xiao Yunyan said with a smile, "This is a joke. How about this? I will give an idea. Let this eunuch decide who to follow in the future." Chapter 93. For a moment, everyone's eyes were on Ning Shu. She froze for a moment, then slowly curtsied. "Thank you, your highnesses, for your love. This servant is a stupid person and doesn't know anything else. I only heard from the village teacher that there was once a great hero called Lu Bu. He was famous for his fighting prowess and was known as Lu Bu among men and red hair among horses. But because he changed masters several times, he was scolded as a slave of 3 surnames and was shameless. In the end, he was hated by all the masters. This servant thought that if I casually changed my allegiance to a new master today, wouldn't I be disloyal and disrespectful to the young master? I'm not worthy of the new master's attention. Your Highness really knows how to teach people. In this case, if I insisted, I would be ruining her righteousness," Xiao Yuni said with a smile. After the banquet, all the princes and young masters bid farewell to each other, and boarded their own carriages to leave. Looking at Ning Shu supporting Xia Hoqing as they left, Xiao Yuni stood on the spot and stared for a long time. It was so long that his palms were red from clenching them before he slowly let go. After leaving the third prince's residence and climbing into the carriage, Ningxu exhaled deeply. Why didn't you choose Xiao Yuni? Xia Hoqing asked quietly. Ningxu asked in confusion. Why did you choose him? He could recognize you with just a pair of eyes. Can't this kind of friendship move you? She didn't know why, but although there was a faint smile on his lips at this moment, his tone was extremely cold, completely different from when he helped her to cover it up. At the thought of what happened just now, Ningxu's head hurt again. If he recognized me, then he stopped me just now and attracted everyone's attention to me. It's tantamount to pushing me into a fire pit. No matter if he did it on purpose or not, he's harming me. If he didn't recognize me and hooked up with anyone who looked similar, then if he could hook up with a little eunuch today, he could hook up with another little palace maid tomorrow. So no matter if he recognized me or not, I don't want a man like him. She suddenly thought of something and asked, Then how did your highness recognize me? What if I was also disguised by someone else? Xiao Yuni was using his eyes, but he couldn't even see her. Xia Hoqing faintly said, A person can change their appearance and deliberately change their voice, but the weight and way of walking and the rhythm of breathing are something that has been cultivated for many years. It's imperceptible and difficult to change. Therefore, I can tell whether you are a human or a ghost the moment I hear it. Ningxu nodded. Previously, he had said that she had a dog's nose, but wasn't he a cat himself? For some reason, the tone of his voice was almost the same as before, but it didn't sound so cold and harsh. Guillermo, who was driving the carriage, turned around and asked, Master, where are we going next? Back to the residence? To the eastern suburbs, Ningxu said. Guillermo was puzzled. Why are you going there? Ningxu said, Because in addition to the night joy, I also found tiny fluorite particles in the soil of the carriage's wheel. And near the capital, only the eastern suburbs have a lot of fluorite ore. Guillermo frowned. There are at least 100 households in the manor in the east of the city. Are we going to check them one by one? That's a waste of time. No need. Ningxu dipped her finger into the tea and slowly drew a topographic map of the eastern suburbs on the table. She especially marked the location of the water flow and the fluorite mine. First of all, the night joy can only grow near the water, and there are only one stream and two springs in the eastern suburbs. So we can easily reduce the search area by more than half. Secondly, the carriage passed by the fluorite mine on the way back to the capital, so the search area is reduced by half. Finally, the manor where people recuperate must be a quiet and secluded place. It's best that no one will pass by there, so that we can avoid being noticed. Her white fingertips finally drew a very small circle on the water-drawn topographic map. So the most suspicious part is only left with this last small piece. I don't know if Brother Huiyemo has heard of Tungto village? Where is that place? She heard Xia Hoqing say, It's a deserted village. A few years ago, hundreds of people died because of the epidemic. The villagers who survived thought that it was inauspicious, so they moved the village. Now there should only be ruins left. It's the best place to hide. Ningxu was just about to exclaim that there was nothing this guy didn't know. She couldn't pretend to be profound, but Huiyemo suddenly said in a serious voice, Someone is following us. Ningxu lifted the corner of the curtain and looked back. She whispered, It seems that Xiao Yunyan is suspicious. I have to think of a way to get rid of them. She asked the maid in yellow about Wan Lu. As long as Xiao Yunyan was suspicious, it was easy to get the information. So not only did she have to get rid of them, but she also had to get rid of them as soon as possible. Then she immediately rushed to Tungto village to investigate. Xia Hoqing was not worried at all. He leaned on the brocade cushion calmly. He didn't move at all. He looked like he was watching the fun. He said casually, You attracted the flies, so you have to deal with them yourself. She had to deal with them herself? Time waits for no one. If she wanted to get rid of these people as soon as possible and not arouse Xiao Yunyan's suspicion, the best way was to do that. Ningxu sighed in her heart. Suddenly, she let out a panicked and hurried gasp. Your Highness! Don't do that! The carriage suddenly stopped. She heard the rustling sound of clothes being undressed. Chapter 94. Several men in black followed them all the way. Suddenly, they saw the carriage of Prince Namping's mansion stop. The carriage driver hurriedly rolled down and stood far away, as if to avoid suspicion. Suddenly, there was a sound that made people want to fall in love with her. Ningxu said in a low voice, "Sorry to offend you." Then she leaned over and knelt on Xiaoqing's legs. "Your Highness, I know I'm wrong. I won't dare to look at other men in the future. Please don't do it here. If someone passing by hears it." The girl sat on both sides of his legs. She didn't dare to touch him, so she put her hands on the inner wall of the carriage. But her breath was close. Xiaoqing's hand that was twisting the bone in his palm froze for a moment. But it was only for a moment. He adjusted himself and continued to play the show with her in a sullen voice. "Do you still want to come out in the future?" No. I'll stay in the mansion obediently. I won't dare to come out and make trouble again." "Your Highness, don't be angry." "Ah. It hurts." "Your Highness. No, you can't touch there. Please forgive me." The voice in the carriage became more and more passionate. The movement could be heard from a mile away. It made people blush. Several men in black didn't give up. They moved closer and saw that in the corner of the curtain that was blown up by the wind, Xiaoxi's black brocade robe and the little eunuch's moon-colored robe were entangled. One was dark and the other was light. It was very intimate. The men in black looked at each other and retreated silently. After a while, Xiaoqing's cold voice came from inside. "Are they still here?" Guillermo stammered. They're all gone." His weak heart was baptized by a storm. He didn't know where to put his hands. He only felt that his Shitzi and Lady Ning's act was really. He knew that Lady Ning had always been more fierce than ordinary people. But his Shitzi actually cooperated, which was completely beyond his expectation. Hearing the response, Xiaoqing said expressionlessly, "Are your arms or legs broken? Why aren't you getting up?" Ningxu immediately got up like a spring and sat back on the opposite side. She rubbed the tip of her nose embarrassedly. "Thank you for your cooperation, Your Highness." In a moment of desperation, she had resorted to such a method. Now she was so embarrassed that she wanted to cover her face. She only felt that her image in front of him had been shattered to such an extent that it was too horrible to look at. Guillermo got into the car and continued his journey to the eastern suburbs. For a long time, no one spoke in the carriage. Only the sound of their own breathing and heartbeats could be heard. Ningxu was really thinking of what to say to break this awkward situation when she heard Xiaoqing silently lift a corner of the curtain to let in a wisp of cold night wind. He lightly said, "There won't be a next time." Ningxu smiled apologetically. "There won't be a next time." "Really?" In the third prince's residence, Xiao Yunyan raised his eyebrows and asked after listening to his subordinate's report. "This servant saw it with my own eyes. It shouldn't be fake." Xiao Yunyan sneered and ridiculed. "No wonder there are so many women in the capital. No matter if it's little 13 or the third miss of the Qi family, Xiaoxizi doesn't like any of them. It turns out that he has such a hobby. Let me be alarmed. I thought that he suspected me." Xiao Yunyan thought for a moment and then said to the skinny, gray-clothed strategist beside him, "But just in case, it's better to do things cleanly. Mister, immediately send a message to the other side. Tell them to dispose of the remaining people tonight. Make sure to do it cleanly and leave no evidence behind." Under the beautiful screen, his expression was extremely gloomy and dark, like a bloodthirsty knife. Chapter 95. Guimo's driving skill was very good. After more than 2 hours, they arrived at the eastern suburbs. At this time, it was almost midnight. The surrounding area of Tungtu village was desolate. There was not even a single light. Everywhere was covered by lush weeds. Many houses had long decayed and collapsed. It really didn't look like a place where people lived. Even ghosts didn't want to stay here. "Is it really here?" Guillermo stood at the entrance of the village and looked here suspiciously. There are no footprints or prints on this road. It doesn't look like someone has passed by. Ningxu felt it was a hindrance. She tied up the oversized sleeves of her official uniform and jumped out of the carriage. If I remember correctly, this Tungtu village has been deserted for 7 or 8 years. It stands to reason that this path should have been covered by weeds. But you see, there is no problem with this path. As for the fact that there are no footprints or wool prints, it shows that these people were extremely vigilant. Before entering the village, they used a thick and soft cotton cloth to wrap the wheels and soles of their feet. Naturally, there won't be too deep marks left. Let's go inside. The fragrance of the night flower is very special. It is our best guide. When she was about to enter the village, she suddenly remembered that Xiaoqing had bad eyes. She hurriedly turned back and said, "Your Highness, this way please. This slave Ba, this little girl will help you." Xiaoqing refused, "No need." Ningxu looked over in puzzlement. She saw him raise his hand and strike out a gust of wind from his palm. A small pebble shot out with the gust of wind, bouncing left and right when it hit an obstacle. As for Xiaoqing, based on the feedback of the sound he heard, he walked forward naturally without any obstruction. Ningxu was flabbergasted. She recalled how she had groveled to support and serve him, and felt like an idiot. Huiyemo smiled and said, "I told you earlier that my master is omnipotent." Ningxu was a little numb. Then why did he? She could understand that he was hiding his strength in front of others. But what about behind the scenes? Xiaoqing, who was in front of them, said lightly, "Because he was tired." Ningxu looked up at the moon in the sky and was speechless. After about 15 minutes, Xiaoqing and Ningxu stopped almost at the same time and said, "There is the fragrance of flowers. There are human voices." Huiyemo was pleasantly surprised. Then it should be not far ahead. The three of them followed the scent of flowers and the sounds of people. After walking for a short distance, they saw a lit house. There were two people digging for something in the courtyard. In the courtyard was an extremely grand flower bed. The flower bed was filled with all kinds of strange flowers and trees. Some were pure and white, some were peach red and flirtatious, some had just sprouted, and some were close to blooming. The gentle and beautiful flowers were mixed together, and the fragrance assailed the nostrils. At first glance, it was as if one had seen a heavenly garden. When the last batch of fertilizer is ready, we can rest for a few days. His Highness said that this batch of flowers will be sent to the palace on the day of His Majesty's birthday. We must not neglect it. One of the people who was working said, "This batch of fertilizers is the freshest. I thought that we would have to wait for a few more days, but I didn't expect His Highness to send us a letter via messenger pigeon asking us to finish everything today. Hee, this saves us a lot of trouble." The other person worked for a long time and finally finished. He straightened up and wiped his sweat. "Why hasn't the fertilizer arrived yet? Mammy Lu is too slow. I'll go and urge her." "I'll go and have a look too." The two people put down the tools and turned to walk into the house. After the two people left, Huiyemo jumped down from the dense shadow of the trees. He stood in the flower bed and picked a flower. He was confused. What fertilizer? He didn't understand at all. But this flower was very beautiful. It was not worse than the flowers in Yunnan province. Ningxu next to him looked at the flower in his hand. She moved her lips and wanted to say something. But in the end she stopped. She motioned Huiyemo to go closer to the house and continued to listen. Inside the house, a mammy in her 40s or 50s was holding a few bowls of freshly made soup. She smiled and walked to the people inside. She said softly, "Girls, the soup is ready. Come and drink it." Chapter 96. Under the dim yellow light, a few girls were tied up and thrown into a corner. Looking at the soup that was brought over, they desperately cried and begged. Tears and snot flowed down their faces, but how could the fish on the chopping block turn over? The granny sighed as she carried the soup. She walked over and grabbed one of the girls by the neck. "My good girls, I didn't want things to turn out this way. Originally, you could have lived for a few more days. You can only blame your bad luck for encountering the incident at Phoenix Terrace. His Highness has given a death order, so I can only blame you. Drink it obediently. After drinking it, you will truly be as beautiful and dazzling as flowers forever." With that, she forced the girl's mouth open and poured the soup in her hand. A stone suddenly flew in and shattered the soup bowl in her hand. The granny was scalded red by the boiling soup. She quickly retracted her hand and shouted, "Who is it?" She saw a slender and very delicate-looking young man sitting on the windowsill. He smiled at her. A forcibly picked melon is not sweet. If they don't want to drink it, why force them? If you really don't want to waste it, you can drink it yourself. Under the moonlight, the young man smiled lazily. It was hard to tell whether he was a man or a woman. His smiling eyes were as clear as water and directly hit people's hearts. It was hard to look at him directly. It was Ning Shu. How did you break in? The mama's face changed and she immediately shouted. Lai air. Lai-san. Ning Shu tilted her head and smiled slyly. Are you looking for those two? As soon as her voice fell, the door was kicked open. Like dragging two dead dogs, Huiyamo kicked the two strong men in front of the mama. He crossed his arms and looked at her coldly. It was obvious that the person who came was not a kind person. The mama immediately became angry and pulled out a short knife to stab Huiyamo. Hey, where did your confidence come from? Huiyamo admired her courage. He lifted his foot and gently kicked the mama. The mama spat out a big mouthful of blood and fainted. She became the third dead dog on the ground. She had one foot in the door of hell, and didn't expect to be rescued. The girl trembled with excitement, and tears flowed down her face. She kept kowtowing to Ning Shu. Thank you. Thank you, benefactor. Ning Shu stepped forward to untie the rope on the girl's body and comforted her in a low voice. Get up. You don't have to kowtow. What's your name? My name is... After being untied, the girl, who had been crying with her head down, suddenly raised her head and gave her an extremely gloomy smile. She threw a handful of powder at her. I'll kill you. Ning Shu suddenly woke up, but she didn't have time to react. She heard the sound of a mechanism beside her ear, and her whole body was thrown into a deep secret passage. Wild Goose returns. It all happened so suddenly that Huiyamo shouted. He bent his fingers and was about to strangle the girl's neck, but the other girls who were tied up in the corner had already surrounded him silently. Powder flew in front of Huiyamo's eyes, and he fell to the ground. After kicking the unconscious Huiyamo into the secret tunnel, the three seemingly weak girls slowly wiped off the fake tears and pretenses on their faces, revealing their old and ugly faces. They were smiling, and their expressions were as gloomy as ghosts. I thought they would be powerful, but I didn't expect them to be so weak. Are these two going to be fertilizer or flower utensils? In the deep and serene tunnel, not a single ray of light could be seen. Only a dim candlelight flickered gently, illuminating dozens of huge jars in one corner of the tunnel, and also illuminating the unconscious Ning Shu and Huiyamo in the other corner. The whole tunnel was filled with an extremely foul smell of rotten blood and a strange fragrance. The mixture of the two made people want to vomit. An axe stained with old blood was placed next to Huiyamo's head. The leader looked at them as if they were livestock and sneered. The taller one is rough and coarse. Later, we will chop him up and take him out to make fertilizer. The shorter one has a very beautiful face. Although she is not a girl, it would be a pity to make her into a flower fertilizer. It would be better to use her as a flower utensil. Chapter 97. Just as the axe was about to hit Huiyamo, there was a sudden movement from the top of the secret passage. It seemed that someone had activated the mechanism. The guards immediately said, "These two people can't run away. We'll deal with them later. Let's go up and take a look first." They immediately left the two people behind and went up to check. However, they didn't know that the moment they turned around, Huiyamo and Ning Shu silently opened their eyes. Ning Shu got up from the cold hard ground. She didn't have time to feel sorry for her waist that was hurt just now. She looked around the secret passage. The smell inside was so strong that she couldn't help but frown. Huiyamo sniffed hard and suddenly stopped. "Oh my god, this is the smell of Bai Mei Xiang." Ning Shu asked, "What is that?" "This flower is a kind of beauty product that is forbidden in the western region. After eating its seeds and grinding it into powder, a woman's face will stay in its best state. She will be beautiful from the inside out. However, at the same time, it is also a harmful poison. After eating it for a long time, people will become dizzy and lose their rational judgment. In the end, they will become a puppet that listens to others. If a man has sex with a woman who has taken Bai Mei Xiang for a long time, well, contact with her, He will slowly be poisoned and addicted to it. Once, the king of Shitualuo used this thing to control his court. In the end, the court was in chaos and it led to the destruction of Shitualuo. The third prince has this kind of thing. What does he want to do? What does he want to do? Ningshu's clear eyes flashed a touch of fierceness. Of course it's for the throne. In fact, it was common for a noble family to keep prostitutes. In many banquets, when they entertained male guests, they would arrange some outstanding maids to serve them. When they were just exchanging cups and getting drunk, who could prevent those beautiful young girls from having such secrets hidden in their bodies? It was no wonder that even though Xiao Yunyan's aptitude was considered mediocre among the princes of His Majesty, he still had a lot of fans in the court. It was likely that he had borrowed the power of this 100-charm fragrance. Perhaps even Jin Sheng himself couldn't believe that the most gentle and reserved prince among the 6 princes was secretly using such a despicable method. Hui Mo's expression was very uneasy. But why does this flower grow here? What happened? Hui Mo fell into a deeper fear. He could not help but bite his fingernails. Because this flower usually grows in corpses. If it grew in a corpse, then the smell of rotting blood in the air was. Ningshu's expression became serious. Her gaze quickly fell on the huge jars in the other corner. She walked over to take a look, and then closed her eyes forcefully. She then walked deeper into the secret passage, and found many of these huge jars in every corner. There were more than 100 of them. There was a girl lying quietly in each of the jars. Some of them had been dead for a long time, and their bones had long rotted away. Some of them had died not long ago, and their finger bones were still clinging to the mouth of the jar. They were looking up at the sky, and their eyes were wide open. Each girl had 17 to 18 wounds on her body, which had long rotted. Inside each wound, there was an extremely beautiful and bizarre 100-charm flower. The roots of those flowers and plants had deeply penetrated into the girls' flesh and blood, greedily absorbing the nutrients inside their bodies. They bloomed and bore seeds, until they were completely sucked dry and turned into a pile of bones. Since then she completely understood. When these girls were alive, they were marionettes that Xiao Yunyan used to control people's hearts. After they died, they were flower vessels that were used to plant more 100-charm flower. Sending them to the village to recuperate when they were sick was simply a pretense. Looking at the scene in front of her, which was even more terrible than hell, Hui Mo clenched his teeth and could not stop trembling. Why do they treat them like this? Are these girls not the same as them in the eyes of those people? Ningshu took a deep breath and turned her head away. She could not bear to look at it for a moment. Some people stood at a certain height, and could not learn to look down. They only felt that they needed to look up or at the same level as human lives, and the ones kneeling at their feet were just livestock that they could trample on at will. Chapter 98. Ningshu reaches out her hand and closes the girl's eyes. Suddenly, she hears a faint cry from a jar in the depths of the secret passage. Help! Help! I don't want to die, someone help me. The voice is like silk pulled to the extreme, and it will break at any time. Ningshu's heart tightens. She immediately chases to the source of the voice. There. The two of them worked together to move away a few jars that were blocking the way. When they opened the lids, they saw a bloody and thin figure lying inside. There was a deep wound on her neck that she was trying her best to cover. Blood seeped out between her fingers with every word she spoke. Her skinny face is covered with blood and tears. She looks only 13 or 14 years old. Seeing Ningshu and Hui Mo, the little girl excitedly reaches out to them. Her throat makes a cracking sound. Don't talk, I will save you. Hui Mo is shocked. He quickly takes out a lot of medicine bottles from his arms and sprinkles her wound. He also tears a piece of his inner clothes and bandages her wound. But his hands are shaking and he can't make a move. Let me do it. Ningshu pushes him aside and bandages the little girl's wound. After bandaging, she has tears in her eyes. She and Hui Mo work together to carry the little girl out of the deep jar. However, no matter how gentle their movements were, the little girl still let out a miserable groan from the pain. That was because there were wounds all over her body. There were cuts all over her body. When the 100-charm fragrance saw human blood, It immediately took root and dug into her flesh. As long as she moved, she would suffer a fate worse than death. Huimo's eyes are red. He punches the ground hard. How can this be? She looks like a child. After feeding the little girl a painkiller, Ningxu takes a deep breath and suppresses the pain in her heart. She says, "Let's look again. Maybe there are other living people." Wiping his tears, Huimo clenches his fist and checks each jar with Ningxu in order. Unfortunately, they can't find a second person who is lucky enough to survive. Only the baimei incense, which exudes a strange fragrance, blooms one by one in the bone objects. It is disgusting. When looking at a jar, Huimo's eyes inadvertently fall on the wrist of the skeleton. He suddenly exclaims, "Lady Ning, look at this bracelet." He raises the wrist of the skeleton and sees a delicate bracelet hanging on the festering flesh. The bracelet is made of fine gold and decorated with 3 gems. It is full of Western style. It is exactly the same as the one he saw in the hand of the brothel in the Moon Lake. "Sister Nainu." Seeing the skeleton and bracelet, the little girl cries. Ning says, "You said she is Nainu?" The little girl weakly nods. "This." Huimo looked at Ningxu in shock. "If this is Ninazes, who is dead in Phoenix Terrace." This skeleton looked like it had been dead for more than a year. It was completely different from the one in the Phoenix stage. How could there be 2 slaves Nian? It's really a ghost. Rubbing her painful Huichan acupoint, Ningxu's eyes fall on the scroll hidden in the skeleton's arms. It seems to be a scroll. It seems to be very important. Even if she dies, she holds it tightly and doesn't want to let it go. Ningxu silently apologizes. She walks over and opens it. She didn't expect it to be a picture scroll. The painting has been around for a long time. The edges and corners are yellow, and there is a large brown blood stain, but the painting is really beautiful. Every stroke of the brush was charming and gentle, and it seriously depicted 2 young girls swinging under a flowering tree. One of them was slightly older, holding a green plum leaf in her hand. She smiled at the person outside the painting, and her eyes were like stars. The other one was slightly younger, leaning on her elder sister intimately. She stretched out her hand to grab the falling flowers from the mandrake tree above her head. The faces of the girls are hundreds of times more beautiful than the blooming mandala flower. Next to the painting there are 2 lines of signatures. Remembering the 21st year of natural selection, August, Yuzeo Nainu swing picture. Ruohui. Looking at the smiling eyes of the girls in the painting, for a time, countless images flashed in front of Ningxu's eyes. There is the hazy rain in Jiangnan, the green plum rolling on the ground, the glaring blood words on the ground, the white hibiscus blooming on the pink sleeves, the ink-colored robe wet by the rain, the magnificent palace wall, the 5th princess's unwilling sigh, Yin Ruohui holding back the tears in the corner of her eyes. Thousands of images converged into a white light and exploded in her mind. She murmurs, "So it is like this." Chapter 99. By the time Ningxu crawled out of the secret passage, Xia Hoqing had already dealt with the other dogs. He was slowly sipping tea under the care of Jiuxi. Ningxu wiped the sweat on her head, looking at her dirty and smelly body, and then looking at the handsome and outstanding man. She felt a little sour in her heart. However, when she saw those vicious dogs, she felt much better. Because the tendons of those people's hands and feet were all cut off, they were thrown into the fertilizer pits that they had dug before, slowly composting. They wanted to commit suicide by biting poison, but their jaws had long been removed. They were like a pile of mud, experiencing the purgatory that the girls who had been tortured by them had suffered. Ningxu's eyes swept across the ground and found pieces of hidden weapons made of gold foil on the ground. At a glance, she knew who made them. She looked at the gold foil a few times with heartache and thought, "What a waste of God's gift, what a waste of God's gift. Why didn't I see him being so generous when we talked about splitting the expenses 50-50? So you already understand the mystery of this case?" After listening to her narration, Xia Hoqing put down the teacup and said slowly. Ningxu shook her head. "I can't tell you everything, just a general idea. Because I still have 3 questions. First, how did she become her? Second, who is the second Nainu? Third, why must it be Phoenix Terrace?" The first question, I should be able to find the answer in the Ministry of Justice. The second question, I have to wait for Zigui to come back, and everything will be revealed. The third question, I can only go to him. Which him? Yinruahui. Xiaoqing nodded, got up and said, take this little girl with you. Ningxu said, what about the mess here? Huimo and Jiuxi can handle it. Xiaoqing casually raised his chin. Gently handing the little girl to Jiuxi, Huimo quickly took the tools and dressed himself up according to the appearance of the leader of the vicious dogs. The other guards who came with Jiuxi helped him. Not long after, the manor full of beautiful flowers had been restored to an ordinary paradise. Xiaoqing said, let's go. Ningxu nodded. Just as she was about to step out of the courtyard, an arrow suddenly shot towards her glabella. Fortunately, Xiaoqing grabbed her and helped her avoid the hidden arrow. Caught off guard, she bumped into Xiaoqing's arms. Ningxu was stunned for a moment. Before she could think of anything else, she immediately looked outside the courtyard. The third prince, Xiao Yunyan, held a bow in one hand and maintained an archery posture with the other. His gaze was gloomy as he looked at them. The mask of gentleness and sincerity that he used to wear on his face was completely removed, revealing the true ferocious face underneath. He put down the bow in his hand, lowered his head and revealed the whites of his eyes. He sneered at them like a ghost. So it really is you two. If she didn't tell me, I would have been deceived by you. Now, since my biggest secret has been exposed by you, I can only ask you to be buried with my secret. Jiuxi and Huimo wanted to stop him, but it was too late. As Xiao Yunyan's voice fell, hundreds of his guards lit the fire in their hands. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion around the courtyard. In an instant, the mountain shook and the ground shook. The raging fire burned the sky. Behind the curtain of fire, Xiao Yunyan let out a wild laugh. Obviously, he had completely gone crazy. I, Xiao Yunyan, am the next appointed emperor of you. Those who dare to block my path to heaven, all die for me. The hot smoke almost burned her face. Ningxu hurriedly covered her face with her sleeves. But fire, there was fire everywhere. Everywhere was fire. More and more sky tremor thunders exploded in the surroundings. The flames that engulfed the heavens pounced towards Ningxu and the others like a ferocious beast. Bite. Roar. What should we do? This fire is too big. It has already surrounded us. We will be burned to death. Ningxu's heart was beating like thunder. Even if they were lucky enough to break through this fire circle, they would still have to face Xiao Yunyan's encirclement. Tonight was probably a bad night. What should I do? Ningxu's mind raced. She urged herself to quickly think of a way to escape, but her mind was empty. Just as she was racking her brains, a hand suddenly stretched out and pushed her into the sea of fire. The moment she fell into the sea of fire, Ningxu turned around in disbelief and looked at Xiaoqing behind her. Under the reflection of the hot fire, his jade-white face was still as handsome as an immortal, but also ruthless and cold, like a piece of ice that would not melt for 1,000 years. Chapter 100. 3 days later. Every corner of the capital was abuzz with discussions. Fear and unease were written all over everyone's faces. Have you heard? Tungtu village in the eastern suburbs was ablaze 3 days ago. The fire burned for 3 days and 3 nights until it was extinguished this morning. The entire village was burned to the ground. Nothing was left. Wasn't that village abandoned because of the plague? There was no one there. How did it catch fire? It's the work of ghosts. It must be the work of ghosts. Hundreds of people died there in a single night. It's over, it's over. Empress Zhou's matter isn't over yet, and now a new resentful ghost has appeared. We can't stay in the capital anymore. Have you heard of the other matter? Duke Ning's Lady Ning, who was appointed by the Empress to investigate the case, has disappeared. Duke Ning sent people to search for her for 3 days, but they couldn't find her. Duke Ning's wife fainted on the street crying. I'm afraid that Lady Ning has met with misfortune. Everyone is guessing that she was dragged down by ghosts and killed. Where's the Golden Buddha? Why hasn't the Golden Buddha come to the capital yet? If we don't suppress these ghosts, our great you will really be finished. In another dark corner of the capital, Yin Ruahui's face was as white as paper. His tightly clenched fists trembled. So many people have died. Stop. I beg you. You should stop. Standing in front of him, the well-dressed woman smiled faintly. Her smile was as warm as a spring breeze, but it was also terrifying. Are you criticizing me? Don't forget that night on Phoenix Terrace, I stabbed Ninu's heart, but you were the one who set the corpse on fire. I'm a devil, but how good are you? In that instant, Yin Ruahui felt a sharp pain in his heart. She raised her hand and gently caressed his pale but handsome face. Only when they're dead will people not know that the Yin family's outstanding and talented eldest young master Yin actually had such an unbearable past with a lowly courtesan of a brothel. Speaking of which, you should be thanking me. Her movements were so gentle, and her voice was so affectionate, as if it contained years of infatuation. But it made Yin Ruahui so scared that he felt as if he had seen a ghost. He retreated 3 steps in succession to avoid that soft barbarian. The woman's hand froze for a moment, her tone suddenly became cold, and a strong hatred surged on her face. Are you blaming me? But the one who caused all this tragedy is you. You let me down back then. Yin Ruahui's eyes reddened. Yes, I'm a sinner, an evil person who should go to hell. So the one who deserved to die wasn't Ninu, not Lady Ning, and not anyone else. It was me. It's me. You should kill me and let everyone else go. The hatred on the woman's face receded as she looked at him who was on the verge of breaking down. A gentle smile appeared on her face again. I won't kill you. After all, you're the person I love the most. Everything I have today is because of you. I used to lie in the mud. If you didn't let me down, how could I luckily obtain this opportunity to turn over a new leaf? I should return to the palace. If I don't go back now, I'm afraid someone will become suspicious. The woman turned around and prepared to enter the carriage to return to the palace. As she turned around, a token accidentally slipped and made a crisp sound. Aya, I dropped my command medallion. Her personal maidservant immediately bent down to pick it up and brought it to her. The front of the token was a special permission to leave the palace at any time, and the back was engraved with the name of the 5th princess, Xiao Changyue. Chapter 101. 8th of April. This was the best day to welcome the Golden Buddha into the capital according to Master Jianneng's calculations. Due to the continuous haunting of ghosts, the entire capital was in a state of panic. They were all hoping to borrow the power of the Golden Buddha to disperse the demons and ghosts and ensure their safety. Thus, the Golden Buddha ceremony, which was originally estimated to be attended by 100,000 people, was now thrice as many as expected. A total of 300,000 people gathered at Phoenix Terrace. When they saw Jin Sheng appear, they all knelt down. Long live His Majesty! Amidst the cheers, the emperor turned around and looked at Empress Chao and Consort Nguyen behind him. The two of them took a step forward at the same time, but the emperor finally held Consort Nguyen's hand and pulled her to the front to accept the worship of the people. The people immediately shouted, "It's Consort Nguyen. She's out. Long live Imperial Consort Nguyen. Imperial Consort Nguyen, please bless us. Imperial Consort Nguyen, please appear and disperse the evil spirits." Empress Chao, who was left behind, still maintained a decent smile on her face. She was perfect and graceful, like a calm wave, like a peony that had bloomed for many years and still refused to wither. However, after the first wave of worship, she coldly turned around and said to the palace maid beside her, "Today's deadline is up. Where's Ning Shu? She hasn't been found yet?" She handed the case to Ning Shu, but until today, not only was the case not solved, it was getting bigger and bigger. Although Jin Sheng didn't say anything on the surface, his actions just now had already revealed everything. Listen to what the people were shouting just now. Not long live the Empress, but long live Imperial Consort Nguyen. She had been the Empress for 25 years, and had always been the Empress. For the first time, this was the first time that her honor as the Empress had been ruthlessly trampled into the mud. It was simply ridiculous. The palace maid Kai Bin fearfully said, "Imperial Consort." No, no. The Empress's graceful and noble eyes were filled with coldness. "All of you are useless trash. She better be dead." Otherwise, if she falls into my hands, I will definitely grind her bones to dust. After the worship, the Master Jian Nung reported that the auspicious hour for the completion of the Golden Buddha had arrived. The emperor nodded and signaled for the ceremony to begin. Accompanied by a deep chant, a 5-meter-tall Golden Buddha, escorted by thousands of Yongchengwei, slowly rolled into the gloomy and abandoned Phoenix Terrace amidst the exclamations of the people. The Golden Buddha's solemn appearance was dazzling with golden light. With its most compassionate smile, it saved the people who believed in it. Wherever it passed, the people exclaimed in unison, bowing their heads and praying silently for the protection of Buddha. Just as the people were devoutly worshipping the Buddha, a strand of Sanskrit came from the horizon, followed by a 7-colored Buddha's light. Under everyone's amazed gaze, it fell on Consort Nguyen, who had been smiling gently. Consort Nguyen was surprised for a moment, but then she revealed an even more gentle smile to the people. Today, she was wearing a pearl-white wide-sleeved long dress. There were no patterns on the dress, only the light muslin fluttering in the wind. Under the brilliant 7-colored Buddha's light, she was solemn and gentle, holy and compassionate, just like the benevolent Guanyin who helped the world. The people excitedly shouted, "Imperial Consort Nguyen has appeared! Guanyin Bodhisattva has appeared! Greetings to Guanyin Bodhisattva! Guanyin Bodhisattva has come to save us! His Majesty is wise! Imperial Consort Nguyen is wise!" The frightened people were finally appeased at this moment. The emperor's face finally revealed a satisfied smile for the first time in a few days. He said to the Empress, "Empress, I remember 10 days ago you said that when the Golden Buddha enters the capital, you will give an explanation for this case as the first gift to welcome the Golden Buddha. What's the explanation?" Under the emperor's unfathomable gaze, Empress Chao clenched her fists and said, "Reporting to your Majesty, the sinful woman Ning Shu has an extremely evil fate. She is the bane of our great Yu's existence. This ghost's mischief was caused by her. Now that her whereabouts are unknown, I think we should capture her entire family to atone for her crimes." Chapter 102. Xiao Yunyan, who had been standing beside the emperor to watch the ceremony, had a sinister smile in his eyes. The 5th princess sighed but did not stop them. Her illness had worsened recently, and she could not even take care of herself. She could only sigh in pity. Below the stage, Xiao Yuni, who was leading Yang Chengwei to escort the Golden Buddha, immediately raised his head and was about to rush forward to plead for leniency. But it was too far. He was too far away. It was too late. A moment of hesitation flashed across the emperor's face before he quickly made a decision. "Then we'll do as the empress says." Then he pulled Consort Nguyen's hand and shouted to the 300,000 people below the stage, "Duke Ning's sinful daughter, Ning Shu, is a jinx who brings calamity to our dynasty. Guards, immediately arrest Duke Ning and his family and take them to." The emperor was about to finish his words when the crowd, which had just calmed down, suddenly burst into exclamations again, as if they had seen a miracle. Everyone followed the sound and turned to look. They saw that the 7-colored Buddha light that had descended not long ago had descended again for some reason. Like a rainbow in the hands of an immortal, it leisurely fell on a person wearing a curtained hat in the corner of the wall. That person's figure was graceful and slender like an orchid. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, she calmly took off the curtained hat on her head and revealed a beautiful smile. It was like the first pomegranate in early summer, like fire. In an instant, the emperor, Empress Chao, the imperial consort, Xiao Yuni, everyone's expression changed. Xiao Yunyan's footsteps swayed and he almost slipped. His face was full of disbelief. How could this be? After a moment of shock, the people discussed and said, "Why is there another Guanyin?" "No, there's only one Guanyin, Consort Nguyen. How can there be a second one?" Outside the crowd, under the protection of the servants, Qi Juanyu curiously shouted at the second Guanyin, in the corner of the wall. When he saw her face, Qi Juanyu suddenly shouted, "I recognize her. She wasn't some Guanyin bodhisattva, she was Ning Shu. Duke Ning Shu, the one who cursed all 9 generations." "What? She was Ning Shu? The infamous Ning Shu? But that miracle is exactly the same as imperial concubines. How could it be fake? The pot of soup that had just cooled down began to boil again. Almost everyone was thinking about the same question. There was only one goddess of mercy, but there were two seven-colored Buddhist lights. Then, between Consort Nguyen and this Lady Ning, who was the real incarnation of Guanyin, a drum was beating in the hearts of everyone present. Amidst the rapid drumbeats, only Ning Shu maintained a smile on her face. She leisurely walked through the crowd that had automatically parted to reach the bottom of the high platform. She walked in front of everyone and bowed towards the emperor and the others. This official Ning Shu greets your majesty, greets the empress, and greets the imperial consort. After witnessing the two miracles of Buddha's light, even the emperor was shocked. Energy appraisal master, what is going on? His expression was one of shock and suspicion. Master Jianneng was stunned for a moment. He immediately stepped forward and bowed. Guanyin has 1,000 faces and 1,000 faces. It's possible that there are two incarnations. Is that so? The emperor hesitated and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, Consort Nguyen cried out in pain and clutched her stomach. The emperor was awakened by her cry. He hurried over and asked with concern, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with my son?" Consort Nguyen leaned on the emperor's shoulder and frowned for a long time. She smiled guiltily. "I've made your majesty worry. It's my incompetence. I've only been standing for a while, and I can't stand it anymore. It doesn't matter if I suffer a little, but if I hurt your majesty's dragon child, I won't be able to escape death." The emperor looked at the fine beads of sweat on her forehead with heartache. He took the handkerchief handed over by the palace maid and personally wiped it for her. He said kindly, "You are already pregnant. Today, you have been standing here for a long time for the Golden Buddha ceremony. It is normal for you to be tired. Now that the ceremony is over, quickly return to the palace with me to rest. I won't allow anything to happen to you and my son." Since 10 years ago, when the youngest 13th prince was born, there was no other child in the harem. He repeatedly wondered if he was getting old. The child in Consort Nguyen's stomach was the only one in 10 years. Moreover, the imperial physician diagnosed that it was the dragon child. When he heard the news, his heart almost burst with joy. Therefore, he wouldn't allow anything to happen to this child. The emperor was about to order the carriage to return to the palace when he heard Ning Shu, who had been smiling and silent, suddenly say, "Reporting to your majesty, I still have something to report." The emperor impatiently asked, "What's the matter?" He was originally prepared to kill Ning Shu and completely end this case. However, the 300,000 people saw the light of Buddha descending on her body. He was afraid that killing her would go against the will of the people, so he was prepared to let it go. However, this girl still didn't want to let it go. Was she seeking her own death? Chapter 103. On the high platform, the bright yellow dragon robe fluttered in the wind. It was as precious as flowing gold, representing the supreme majesty and power. It made people afraid to look directly at it. Below the high platform, the beautiful woman slowly bowed with her hands clasped in front of her chest. Her voice was as clear as flowing water, but it made the bustling crowd unconsciously quiet down. Everyone's eyes were focused on her, and they were all frightened by her narration. To be exact, there are 2 murder cases. One of them happened in Tungto village in the eastern suburbs. It spanned several years and involved hundreds of lives. Among the victims, there were singers from the opera troupe, young girls from poor farmers, dancers who were performing to survive, and female beggars on the street who were picked up when they were begging for food. The oldest of them was no more than 17 or 18 years old, and the youngest was only a little more than 10 years old. All of them died silently in some unknown corner. Before they died, they were squeezed dry of their last drop of useful parts. After they died, their flesh was badly mutilated, and they never closed their eyes in peace. The other one was the female corpse Nainu, who was wearing a tasseled phoenix robe, and was burnt to a crisp in this phoenix terrace not long ago. The murderers of these 2 cases happened to be hiding in the capital under the feet of the emperor, in the palace of His Majesty the Emperor. After she finished speaking, there was a moment of silence, followed by waves of frightened gasps. Even the emperor's eyes widened in an instant. Consort Nguyen, who was beside him, turned pale. Xiao Yunyan almost subconsciously reached out his hand, wanting to fish out something to shoot through her mouth on the spot. Shoot through her eyebrows and let her blood splatter on the spot. But where was his bow and arrow? No, it wasn't here. Because he didn't dare to bring it with him to watch the Buddha welcoming ceremony. Not to mention the bow and arrow, he couldn't even find a dagger now. And he could only watch as she continued to speak. She continued to completely cut off his path to the throne in front of the hundreds of thousands of people, and his imperial father. Consort Nguyen sighed softly. Your Majesty, if there are any serious cases, it's not too late to solve them tomorrow. Why do you have to talk about those bloody things on such a holy and festive day as the completion of the Golden Buddha? If you cause the people to panic, then things will go against your wishes. The emperor thought for a moment and was about to say something when Empress Chao suddenly opened her mouth. Ningshu, do you know what you are saying? Framing the royal family is a capital crime punishable by the execution of 9 generations of the family. Ningshu was neither servile nor overbearing. I know. His Majesty is above me, and the Golden Buddha is in front of me. If I say half a word of falsehood, let me be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Empress Chao said. Since she dares to gamble with her life, Your Majesty might as well listen to what she has to say. If she says even one word of nonsense, Your Majesty can fulfill her wish and allow her to be sentenced to death, so as to shut the mouths of the people. The emperor pondered for a moment. Looking at the surprised and doubtful faces of the people below the high platform, he could only nod his head. At the side, Consort Nguyen's expression was dark and gloomy. Ningshu curtsied and continued. Before solving these 2 cases, I ask Your Majesty to listen to the first story. Xiao Yunyan gritted his teeth and sneered. At such a critical moment, you still have the mood to tell a story? You really don't know life from death. Imperial Father, I think this Ning family's daughter is just talking nonsense and sensationalizing things. Imperial Father, please don't listen to her nonsense. Immediately tie her up and imprison her for questioning. Ningshu's eyes were as bright as stars. She gently looked at him and said with a smile, Your Highness, why are you in such a hurry? Could it be that you have a guilty conscience? Everyone thought in their hearts, that's right. This Lady Ning had already gambled with her life. If she refuted her at this time, what else could it be other than having a guilty conscience? Xiao Yunyan felt like he had been slapped in the face. He couldn't say a word. If his gaze could turn into a raging fire, Ningshu would have been burned to death on the spot. Chapter 104. It's a story about searching. Ningshu's soft and sweet voice slowly unfurled the scroll of the story. In Jiangnan's brocade weaving house, the singers Yuzeo and Nainu were sisters who depended on each other. Unfortunately, their parents died early, and the 2 sisters had nowhere else to go and ended up in a brothel. The elder sister, Yuzeo, was 3 years older. She was as beautiful and refined as a devil's snare in full bloom. She was also intelligent and considerate. She often took care of the other younger sisters in the brothel. The younger sister, Nainu, was lively and quick-witted. She had a celestial voice, and anyone who heard her would be amazed. At the age of 13, she caught the eye of a local rich gentleman in his 70s or 80s. He wanted to buy her as a concubine. That rich gentleman was known for being cruel and ruthless. The number of girls he had tortured to death couldn't be counted on one hand. The elder sister, Yuzeo, couldn't bear to see her younger sister fall into a pit of fire at such a young age. She knelt in the snow for 3 days and 3 nights in front of the brothel. She begged and kowtowed to no avail. In the end, she decided to send herself to that rich gentleman's house. The listeners couldn't help but sigh. This elder sister is really protective of her younger sister. That rich gentleman is already in his 70s or 80s, yet he still defiles a young girl. He really deserves to go to hell. Ningshu nodded and said briskly, Yes, so that night, he suddenly fell ill and went to hell. The crowd immediately burst into cheers. Indeed, the heavens have eyes. This kind of bastard deserves to die. Ningshu smiled and continued, The elder sister returned to the brocade weaving house and helped her younger sister in difficult times. Although it was unbearably bitter, they found joy in it. That was until they met someone. The eldest son of the Yin family's twin beauties, Yin Ruohui. The listeners were all shocked. For years ago, the fifth princess took a fancy to Yin Ruohui at a polo tournament and insisted on making him her husband. She scared him so much that he hurriedly fled to study abroad. Everyone knew about this, and the fifth princess became the laughingstock of the city. Who would have thought that the eldest son of the Yin family would give up on the princess and hook up with a brothel prostitute? It was really. Countless gazes of sympathy and mockery surged over like waves. Xiao Zhongyue's nails dug deep into his palms, and his face was extremely ugly. Ning Shu, sister, Yu Zhao and Yin Ruohui met in the rain. They fell in love at first sight, and when they saw each other again, they pledged their lives to each other and spent the best time of their lives together. Who would have thought that the good things in the world would not be firm, and the colorful clouds would scatter and the colored glass would be brittle? Just as Yu Zhao mustered up the courage to tell Yin Ruohui the biggest secret of her life, he unexpectedly escaped. Many emotional women immediately said with righteous indignation, "Ah, that Yu Zhao girl is too pitiful." That Yin family's eldest young master looked like a man of great stature, and I really thought that he was a fine young master who wouldn't bend his back for power. To think that I once had a crush on him. I didn't expect him to be such a liar. How despicable. Hey. In the midst of the crowd's disdain and insults, Xiao Changyue's vertigo flared up, and she almost fainted. Consort Nguyen, who was beside her, quickly supported her. Consort Nguyen worriedly said, "Changyue, did your old illness flare up again? Someone quickly bring the heart-congealing pill." Xiao Changyue's personal palace maid immediately brought the pill and helped her take it. After taking the pill, Xiao Changyue let out a long sigh of relief. She turned her head and continued to look down at Ning Shu, who was below the stage, her eyes filled with self-deprecating sorrow. Ning Shu looked up and continued to speak. Yu Zhao was infatuated and resentful. She escaped from the brothel and came to the capital to find Yin Ruohui for an explanation. She didn't expect that there would be no news of her whereabouts after that. Her younger sister, Nainu, was worried and wanted to follow her older sister. She didn't expect that she would be caught by the procuress and suffered an inhumane beating. She was badly mutilated and thrown into a mass grave by the procuress to wait for death. She didn't expect that with the blessing of the heavens, she didn't die. She still had her last breath and was saved by a little sister who risked her life to collect her corpse. Later, she was taken in by the leader of an opera troupe and came to the capital to find her older sister. Speaking of which, her luck was really good. At that time, it happened to be the birthday of the imperial concubine dowager in the palace. The troupe she was in was chosen by His Highness Prince Kuo and accepted into the prince's mansion to perform for the imperial concubine dowager. She tried her best to sing until her voice broke. Finally, His Highness Prince Kuo took pity on her and wrote a note to her, telling her to go to the yamen to find her sister. Did she find her older sister later? The listener asked. No. Ning Shu slowly shook her head and expressed her deep sympathy for the woman. At the time, she was holding the hard-won slip and was at a loss as to which yamen she should go to ask. Suddenly, she remembered that she had encountered bandits on Mount Yinshi on the way north to the capital. She had only managed to escape by a hair's breadth. She carried the slip with her apprehension and walked into the Ministry of Justice to ask. Then she learned that her sister was already dead. Before she entered the capital, she was killed by bandits on Mount Yinshi along with many other passers-by. Her body was beyond recognition. This was also the reason why no clues could be found in the Ministry of Revenue and Jingji Prefecture. Yu Zhao's name didn't even have time to step into the capital before it was annihilated at the foot of Mount Yinshi, like a pitiful mosquito. Chapter 105. Many of the people present still clearly remembered the horrifying robbery and murder case on Mount Yinshi 3 years ago, because that group of bandits was truly deranged. Not only did they rob money, they also tortured and killed all the passers-by they robbed and hung their bodies on the branches, forming a tragic forest of corpses. There were at least a few hundred corpses. Dripping blood fell like rain from the top of the branches, dripping down, and the smell of blood filled the air. What was hell on earth? This was it. After this matter was exposed, it caused the emperor to be furious, and he specially sent troops to suppress the bandits. After a full 3 years, finally, a few days ago, the last bandit was beheaded by the Yongchengwei led by His Highness the Sixth Prince. It was truly satisfying. The people present recalled that group of bandits and trembled. They continued to ask, then what happened to Nainu? Did she leave the capital? If that silly girl really left, how good would that be? Ningxu hoped so. Unfortunately, no, she didn't. She softly said. After the birthday celebration of Imperial Concubine Dowager, the opera troupe completed their mission, and His Highness Prince could let them go. Later, the troupe was chosen by another noble and brought back into the manor. Isn't that a good thing? Everyone said. Is it a good thing? Perhaps. Ningxu let out a cold laugh and clapped her hands. Even a little girl wrapped in a wounded cloth slowly walked into the crowd with the help of the people beside her. She walked in front of Ningxu, and also walked into the eyes of the emperor and the people. Ningxu encouraged her softly, and then said to the crowd in a clear voice, her name is Jean and she is one of the girls who was brought into the house by the noble. Jean roll up your sleeves. Jean had been trembling in fear, until she felt Ningxu's warm hand holding her. She opened her pale lips and took a deep breath. Slowly, she unwrapped the white cloth wrapped around her arm bit by bit. Then 5 or 6 glaring wounds that were so deep that bones could be seen were placed in front of everyone's eyes. The wounds were so deep that bones could be seen, and crimson red flesh and blood could be seen. If it was just a wound, it would be fine. What was even more terrifying were the strange flowers and plants that grew out of the blood. Every single one of their roots was deeply embedded in the fresh flesh and blood. They relied on the nutrients of human flesh to become dazzling and eye-catching. What the hell was that? Horrified gasps could be heard. The citizens who were closest and could see it the clearest turned their heads away at the same time. They did not dare to look at this terrifying scene. Some of them could not bear to see it, and tears even fell from their eyes. Ningxu continued, there are more than 10 similar wounds on her body, each of which is several times deeper and more tragic than this one. But she was already the luckiest among all the victims. This was because of the 106 girls. Apart from her, the others couldn't even speak. They had all died in the fire that burned down the manor in Tengtu village 3 days ago. The youngest one is only 9 years old. 106. The youngest was only 9 years old. These two numbers were like a sharp sword that ruthlessly stabbed into the hearts of all the citizens present. Which family didn't have daughters and nieces? Which family didn't have childish children? And these girls and children, who were treasured by the people, were actually treated like livestock and brutally killed. This was simply disgusting. The citizens' anger was immediately stirred up. The angry voices of the 300,000 citizens were like thunder that immediately raised the entire Phoenix Terrace. Who did it? Who did it? Who is the murderer? Quickly tell us the murderer's name. Quickly. Amidst the countless angry roars, Ningxu curled her lips and smiled sweetly in Xiao Yunyan's direction. The most brilliant afternoon sun shone on her body, illuminating her entire body. She was as dazzling as a peerless jade that had been dug out from the mountain, making people not dare to look directly at her. She tilted her head and lightly shrugged. Sorry, Third Highness, I have disappointed you. This little girl is really sorry that I wasn't burned to death by the fire you started. I didn't expect that the secret tunnel you dug in the courtyard would become my escape treasure in the end. This little girl is really grateful to the point of shedding tears. Tell me, isn't this the Buddhist saying? Heavens will reincarnate? Everyone was stunned for a moment. Then they realized what she meant, and the 300,000 citizens immediately went into an uproar. What? This deranged murderer was actually the magnanimous and prudent third prince that the courtiers said was most worried about the country and the people. Was this real or fake? But the witnesses were here. How could they let her quibble? Chapter 106. What was the most dazzling thing in the world? Was it the sun? No, it was tens of thousands of direct, doubtful, and resentful gazes. Those gazes were sharper than the sharpest sword, and more terrifying than the most powerful sky-shaking thunder. Exposed to that kind of gaze, Xiao Yunyan's entire body trembled. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead like a broken string, causing him to fiercely take 3 steps back and hit the wall behind him. It was over. It was over. His lifetime of glory and splendor, as well as his bright future, were all going to be ruined today. Someone come quickly, immediately kill this slut Ning Shu. On the high platform, His Majesty was livid. The chief eunuch beside His Majesty immediately trotted to Ning Shu and warned her in a low voice. Ning Shu, do you know what you are talking about? This was in front of 300,000 people. Do you want His Majesty to lose face? Ning Shu, let me give you a piece of advice. If you dare to talk nonsense again, be careful of your head. Ning Shu turned around and showed him a fearless smile. Of course she knew. Not only did she know, but she also knew everything. What did the royal family value the most? Reason? Justice? What a joke. Only His Majesty, the most supreme face of the royal family. As for the lives of hundreds of girls, it was nothing compared to that. In order to protect the royal family's dignity, His Majesty would definitely turn the matter into a small one and cover it up. Xiao Yunyan might not even be punished. Therefore, she had chosen this moment to spread the news in front of 300,000 people. She wanted to spread the news by word of mouth in the shortest amount of time. Then, she wanted to spread the news throughout the entire capital and the entire Great Yu, so that there was no possibility of covering it up. Xiao Yunyan immediately knelt on the ground and crawled to His Majesty. He swore and begged. Father, this was not done by a Ken. It was Ning Shu. She couldn't solve the case in the stipulated time, so she framed me. Father, please believe Ken. Your son has always been loyal to you and the imperial court. I have never been disloyal. The emperor lowered his head to look at his eldest son who was kneeling at his feet and crying bitterly. He could not help but feel a trace of pity in his heart. Out of all his sons, this was the only one who respected him the most and was almost obedient to him. He still remembered that when this child was 7 years old, he had waited in the snow outside Taiji Palace for 6 whole hours, almost freezing himself into a little snowman, just to wait for him to leave court. At that time, the child was so cold that he was shivering, but he still happily handed over the things in his arms to his father. Father Emperor, this is your son's favorite, phoenix tail bamboo fungus soup. Your son thought that you must be tired from going to court and must be hungry and cold, so I specially filled a cup for you. Father, don't worry. Ken has been carefully protecting it in his arms. It's still warm now. Father, please taste it quickly. Seeing the reluctance in the emperor's eyes, Xiao Yunyan's heart immediately exploded with unbridled joy. So what if Imperial Father suspects him? He was the eldest son of the emperor. He was the eldest son of the imperial family. If he was convicted in front of the people today, the prestige of the imperial family would be greatly reduced. Imperial Father would never allow this to happen. What was more, the farm had been completely burned by him. Except for Jean Eyre, the so-called witness, Ning Shu had no other evidence. She wanted to trip him up? In her dreams. Xiao Yunyan had worked hard for 20 years and only climbed half of the stairway to heaven. He would never allow a woman to easily destroy his efforts. Since the fire that night did not burn her to death, he would watch with his own eyes how her whole family would be executed and die miserably. He hid the twisted sneer in his eyes, raised his head and said with righteous indignation, Father, there's one thing that Ken did not dare to report to you before. But today, I have to tell you. Not long ago, I was ordered by you to patrol the border. There I caught a spy and found a letter from the spy. In the letter, there was a detailed map of the border of Great Yu. Ken was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. But the more terrible thing happened later. Ken found that the spy was from Duke Ning, and the handwriting on the letter was exactly the same as Duke Ning's. These days, Ken has been working hard to investigate this thoroughly. I didn't expect that before I finished the investigation, I would encounter such a thing today. Xiao Yunyan's face showed a very bitter expression. He kowtowed hard. It doesn't matter that Ken was wronged to death. But today, They dared to frame me in front of 300,000 people. Tomorrow, they will definitely collude with the enemy to harm our country. Aken begs imperial father to behead Duke Ning and Ningxu in public. Otherwise, the 100 years of Great Yu's foundation will be destroyed. Chapter 107. If the expression on the emperor's face was one of displeasure, then at this moment, it was one of fury. Since ancient times, what did the emperor hate the most? It was betrayal and disloyalty. Who was he? He was the high and mighty son of heaven, the one and only emperor of the Great Yu dynasty. But there was someone who dared to collude with the enemy right under his nose, plotting a rebellion. This was simply unforgivable. The raging flames of anger surged to the top of his head, and the emperor laughed angrily. Good, good, good. My most trusted official actually dared to do such a thing. It's simply wonderful. And Xiao Yunyan, who was kneeling at the emperor's feet and weeping bitterly, had a venomous look in his eyes. As early as that night 3 days ago, after he set the fire, he ordered someone to forge a letter that Ning Diyuan secretly communicated with the enemy, intending to completely wipe out Duke Ning's mansion in one fell swoop to vent the anger in his heart. Unexpectedly, it actually came in handy today. In addition, the so-called spies, he had as many death warriors as the hairs on an ox. He could casually find someone to impersonate, and that person would be able to trample Ningxu, who could not be burned to death, and her several hundred family members into hell. Ningxu, oh Ningxu, don't blame me for being ruthless. As long as you blame yourself for courting death, daring to oppose me, then I can only let you die without a burial place. The emperor angrily said, Come, investigate. Immediately bring that spy and the evidence in front of me for a thorough investigation. If the third prince's words are true, I want Duke Ning and his entire family to be executed. Just when the emperor was furious, he suddenly heard someone leisurely clapping in the deathly silence. Everyone could not help but feel nervous for this person, secretly sighing. What kind of person is so reckless? Can't they see that the emperor is furious? Clapping at this time is simply courting death. Everyone's eyes quickly followed the clapping, wanting to see who this extremely daring person was, and found that the person who was clapping was not someone else, but Ningxu herself, who was on the verge of death. This Lady Ning, could it be that in a moment of excessive cowardice, she had gone crazy? In the center of the crowd, Ningxu's lips curved into a smile. She shook her head and sighed. Amazing, amazing. Your Third Highness's methods truly live up to their reputation. This little girl truly admires you. Not only are your methods impressive, but your courage is also outstanding. Time and time again, you have toyed with His Majesty in the palm of your hand. This kind of courage, even if my daughter 3 lives, 3 lives, 3 lives, 3 lives, she would not be able to compare to your highness. Even at the brink of death, he was still so stubborn. Xiao Yunyan narrowed his eyes and looked at her coldly. He immediately reprimanded. What nonsense are you spouting? Father Emperor, Aken thinks that we should cut off her tongue immediately, so that she can no longer deceive the people of Great Yu. TSK, was I the one who confused everyone, or was it you, the third prince? Ningxu raised her eyebrows and smiled. She bowed respectfully to the emperor and said in a clear voice, Has your Majesty ever heard of a flower called the 100 Charm Fragrance? The emperor revealed a suspicious expression. How could he not have heard of this thing? The main culprit behind the destruction of Shi Tuoyuo's hundreds of years of foundation was this terrifying flower. The example of Shi Tuoyuo had also been taken as a warning by the successive rulers of other countries, so he naturally knew of this flower. But why did she suddenly mention this flower? Could it be? The emperor's heart thumped. Ningxu continued. This little girl has heard that your highness has always been filial to your majesty. Every once in a while, your majesty would recommend some peerless beauties to your majesty to relieve your majesty's boredom. But whether this is truly out of filial piety or a hidden evil intention, perhaps your majesty will have to carefully examine it to know. Chapter 108. Ningxu's words were like the first clap of thunder in the spring of March. It was earth-shattering and shocked everyone present. What did she mean by that? Could it be that the third prince had gone mad? He actually poisoned the beauties presented to the emperor with such a terrifying poison. This was simply unbelievable. But they had no choice but to believe it because Xiao Yunyan's face had already explained everything. In an instant, Xiao Yunyan's face was completely drained of blood, and he looked like a dead man. The gloominess and arrogance from before had completely disappeared. All that was left was endless fear. He desperately screamed in his heart. How did she know? How did she know? This was the biggest secret of his life. It must be Xia Hoqing. It must be the two of them who conspired to set up today's show. The mask of a filial son and loyal subject was completely torn off. His mind was spinning like it was about to explode as he desperately thought of what kind of lie he could use to make his imperial father not believe Ning Xu's nonsense. Imperial father. But it was too late. Once the seed of doubt was planted, it was very hard to pull it out, especially when it was related to his own safety. Before he could say anything, the emperor raised his hand to interrupt him and coldly said, "If you have anything to say, wait until the imperial doctors have examined it. No matter which one of you dares to deceive me, I will not forgive you." The emperor was furious, and the imperial bodyguards were extremely anxious. Very quickly, the imperial physicians came with the results of the examination and reported, "Reporting to your majesty, the bodies of Beauty Wang and Beauty Sun presented by the third prince have indeed found 100 charm incense." In an instant, Xiao Yunyan collapsed on the ground as if he was half dead. It was over. This time he was completely finished. Even the gods couldn't save him. The once arrogant eldest prince was now kneeling in front of the emperor. He slammed his forehead on the ground and desperately begged. Aken was confused for a moment. Aken was blinded by lard. But father, please believe me. Aken really didn't want to kill you. Father, please forgive Ken this time. I beg you. I beg you. Only the word miserable could describe his tear-streaked appearance, but Ning Xu didn't find him pitiful at all, because in that manor that had been burned down by the fire, there were many girls who had been innocently defiled and could not rest in peace. The sound of the bloody kowtow mixed with the imperial physician's report was like a continuous slap, causing the emperor's entire body to shake. He looked in disbelief at his once most trusted son, and then at the imperial physician who would never lie to him. His face suddenly exploded into a great smile. However, that smile was incomparably cold, like the sharpest blade in the world. "Haha, you really are my good son." After the emperor finished laughing, he lifted his foot and forcefully kicked Xiao Yunyan's chest, ruthlessly kicking him down from the high platform. Get lost! How long was it to fall from the throne of an immortal emperor to the hell of Avicii? It was just this 30 feet tall platform. Xiao Yunyan spat out a mouthful of blood as he tumbled down from the high platform of over 100 steps. A tower that had been built with meticulous calculations and painstaking efforts collapsed in an instant. The commoners that had been gathered around the high platform immediately dispersed and distanced themselves from him. Xiao Yunyan struggled to get up and looked around in panic. All he saw was endless disdain, hatred, and disdain on the commoners' faces. It was like they were looking at a wild dog that everyone wanted to beat. In the crowd, a half-eaten candied haw in the hand of a child smashed it on his face. Behind him, the emperor on the high platform coldly and mercilessly announced, "A prince who commits a crime will be punished the same as a commoner. The third prince, Xiao Yunyan, has gone mad and harmed the commoners. He has committed such a heinous crime. Starting today, he will be stripped of his status as a prince and demoted to a commoner. He will be locked in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. After autumn, he will be executed immediately." The bell of death buzzed in his head. The flesh on Xiao Yunyan's face trembled. He was almost like a mad lion. He suddenly pulled out a sword from Yang Chengwei beside him and stabbed at Ning Xu. He was going to die. He was going to die. Then she would not live either. Even if he, Xiao Yunyan, died, he would drag this B*TCH down with him. Seeing Xiao Yunyan's intentions, Xiao Yunyan's pupils constricted. He immediately rushed over to stop Xiao Yunyan, but someone was faster. A round eastern pearl shot out from the crowd like lightning and hit Xiao Yunyan's wrist. It numbed his wrist, and the sword in his hand fell to the ground with a bang. Then another eastern pearl hit his knee, causing him to fall to the ground in an instant. Xiaoqing, who had appeared in the crowd, said lazily, "Juicy, my hand accidentally slipped and the pearl in my hand flew out. Did I hurt anyone?" Juicy supported him and said in a similar tone, "Master, you seem to have accidentally hurt the third prince, but you can't see. The third prince is magnanimous and will not bear a grudge." Xiaoqing nodded indifferently and continued to play with the finger bone in his hand. He smiled lightly and said, "Then thank you for your generosity." Chapter 109. It's Prince Xiahou. It's really him. The appearance of Xiaoqing was like a faintly discernible red-crowned crane that accidentally descended from the ninth heaven to the human world. Everyone did not even have the time to see when the third prince was taken away by the Dragon City guards. They just tiptoed and craned their necks, wanting to see the face of the crown prince of Xiaoqing, who was rumored to make the human world pale in comparison. At first glance, he really lived up to his reputation. The girls' cheeks were dyed red, and one of them even fainted due to excitement. Countless girls rushed towards him, but due to the cold temperament around him, they did not dare to get close. This scratched the budding hearts of countless girls. As if disturbed by the hustle and bustle around him, he slightly frowned and then opened his mouth to bring the topic back to the case. "Lady Ning, you seem to have not finished your story just now. Did Miss Nainu escape?" Ning Shu's voice was very calm. "No, she is dead. In the third prince's manor in the eastern suburbs, I saw her body with my own eyes." As soon as she finished speaking, someone beside her shouted, "Hey, this is impossible. If Nainu is dead, then who is the body that was found on Phoenix Terrace not long ago? How can there be two Nainu?" Yes, how can there be two Nainu? Yes, how can there be two Nainu? Ning Shu sighed softly. She raised her head against the dazzling sunlight and looked at the person hiding behind all the fog on the high platform. And that person looked down at the mayfly like beings from high above. His face was calm, like a pool of unfathomable stagnant water. No one could see any trace of expression on his face. After being stunned for a moment, a frightened expression appeared on noble Consort Ruan's face. She immediately said, "How can there be such a thing as coming back from the dead and dying again in this world? It must be the work of ghosts." Ning Shu sneered and shook her head. This case seems strange and unpredictable. What Empress Zhou on Phoenix Terrace? What ghosts? In the end, it has nothing to do with this case. It's just a smokescreen used by the murderer to hide the truth. And the murderer is openly hiding behind all of us, watching us in fear and anxiety, watching us run for our lives, watching us being played in the palm of his hand. Her words were powerful, causing many people to unconsciously tremble, as if there were needles pricking their backs. They only felt a chill down their spine. The emperor frowned in confusion. "But 10 days ago, I saw the ghost floating above Phoenix Terrace with my own eyes. How can it be fake?" Someone else chimed in. "That's right. There are also the blood letters that appeared out of thin air in the residence of Yun. There are countless witnesses, so how could it be man-made?" Ning Shu said slowly, "Everyone, please calm down. This is the second story I'm going to tell you. But before that, please watch me perform a magic trick. Forsythia, take out the thing that I have prepared." Forsythia immediately presented the thing that she had prepared in front of Ning Shu. Everyone stood on their tiptoes curiously, thinking that this Lady Ning had prepared something incredible. They did not expect that it was just a cup of ordinary water without any color. What kind of magic could a cup of water do? What was this Lady Ning trying to do? Then, they saw Ning Shu take the cup of water and leisurely run one round on the sparse charred ground below the stage. With a splash, she poured the seemingly ordinary cup of water in her hand down. Not long after, the people who were closest to her cried out in surprise. "Blood letter! Oh my God, the blood letter really appeared! What exactly is going on?" Following the cries of the crowd, more and more people crowded over to take a look. They saw that on the empty ground, there really was blood stains appearing out of thin air. More and more blood stains gathered, and slowly formed a horrifying pool of blood. It was as if there was too much blood in the sea of hell, and it had surged into the human world. Everyone covered their mouths in horror and turned around to run. However, they heard Ningxu say with a leisurely smile, "Everyone, don't be afraid. I just said that this is just a magic trick." Ningxu took the handkerchief that Forsythia handed over and carefully wiped the water stains on her fingers. Then, she slowly raised her head. "Everyone, please take a closer look. What is the color of this floor tile?" Everyone blurted out. "It's dark green. And it's the kind that was burnt." Did they still have to ask this question? Ningxu nodded slightly and tapped her toes on the floor tile. "Yes, this floor tile is dark green. The color is extremely dark, so many things will be covered up. For example, there's something called lichen. When it's ground into powder, it's a light blue color. If it's sprinkled on the floor tile, it's hard to notice if you squat down and look carefully. The strange thing about lichen is that once it comes in contact with acid water, which is the cup that I just poured, it will gradually turn red. If you don't believe me, you can go home and try it." Previously, when she saw the word absolute in front of her for the first time, she was shocked and confused, so much so that she was completely confused. When she calmed down and thought about it calmly, she suddenly remembered that she faintly smelled a hint of sourness beside the blood letter. Therefore, a guess arose in her heart. She tested it in private, and it was indeed the case. "Today, I didn't do this magic trick to fool everyone. This second case was a huge illusion from beginning to end, and in this illusion, there were 3 people who did the magic trick at the same time." Chapter 110. When I found out that the real Nainu was already dead, I was also full of questions. Who was the burnt body in Phoenix Terrace? How could there be 2 Nainu? I only found out when I sent a maid to Qingzhou to investigate. Lan Xiang. She was called Lan Xiang. She had struggled to grow up in a brothel with Yuzeo and Nainu. She was also Nainu's best friend. She was Lan Xiang who had dug Nainu out of a mass grave. She was born of the same mother as her sister Yuzeo. Nainu was also very intelligent. Not long after she had fallen into the third prince's palace, she had discovered the palace's secret. She had tried to lead her sisters out of the devil's den, but she had not expected to be discovered by the third prince. The group had been surrounded and killed. It had been a hair-raising massacre. None of the dozens of girls had been left alive. One by one, their legs had been cut off, their tongues had been cut off, and their bodies had been drained of blood. Not only had they died, but they had also been thrown into a clay pot to be used to plant the 100 charm incense. As the mastermind behind this escape, she had been treated tens of thousands of times worse than death. Not only had she been tortured, she had been humiliated and tortured by hundreds of guards every day and night. Even the third prince's dog had been on her body. After hearing the news of her sister's death, her best friend, Lan Xiang, was her only thought in this world. Thus, on her deathbed, she desperately begged a guard she had helped before to send her identity card and an ancestral golden bracelet to Lan Xiang as a memento of their friendship in this world. But who would have known that after Lan Xiang received the identity card and the golden bracelet, she had guessed that something big had happened to her. After Lan Xiang arrived in the capital, she had wandered around for many days. She had begged everywhere. However, she was only a singer of lowly birth. In the capital where nobles were everywhere, she could only meet countless cold nails and disdainful looks. Just as she was in despair, on the 8th day of the 12th lunar month, at the Bathing Buddha festival, she had coincidentally met a person. She had never expected to meet someone here, who could easily provide her with help. This great surprise shocked and delighted her at the same time. However, after the intense ecstasy, she suddenly realized that the identity of that person was extremely precious, and was not someone she could easily contact. As a result, she racked her brains and finally came up with a good idea. That was to take Nainu's identity card and enter the pleasure boat on the moon-embracing lake under Nainu's name. She would make an agreement with the pleasure boat's procuress and become the most famous singer on the moon-embracing lake in the capital. This way, when she heard the name Nainu, that person would definitely appear to recognize her and help her search for the missing Nainu. And Lan Xiang, who had practiced with Nainu for many years, had a voice that was not inferior to hers, and had become the magic weapon and support that helped her succeed. Therefore, she used the first magic trick in this case, She turned herself into Nainu. But what she did not expect was that what she thought was a good idea, in the end, became the poison that killed her. On the high platform, Empress Chow listened attentively and said, "How do you know who she met at the bathing Buddha festival and not at any other time? Now that everyone is dead, the dead tell no tales. Is it all based on your clever mouth?" Ningshu methodically said, "My conjecture naturally has its reasons. First, I found this contract that she signed with the pleasure boat's procuress in the Ministry of Revenue's musical house. She signed it, Nainu, on the 10th day of the 12th lunar month in the 24th year of Heaven's selection. Although the signature was Nainu's name, the handwriting was exactly the same as Lan Xiang's handwriting that my maid brought back from Qingzhou. And 2 days before the 10th day of the 12th lunar month in the 24th year of Heaven's selection, it was the bathing Buddha festival, the day all the nobles in the capital would appear. Secondly, I asked her friend, Chun Nyang, who was on the pleasure boat. Chun Nyang said that she went on the pleasure boat to find someone, but she was unwilling to say who she was looking for. I think it's not that she was unwilling to say, but that she couldn't say. She disguised herself as Nainu. If she told others that the person she was looking for was Nainu, then her plan would be completely ruined. Other than that, there was another reason. She wanted to help that person hide a secret that could implicate many people, and even cause their heads to be separated from their bodies. Chapter 111. Empress Chow thought for a moment and said, "You mean someone mistook Lan Xiang for the dead Nainu, so they set up such a big trap and killed her to silence her?" Ningshu nodded and said firmly, "Yes, that's exactly it." Empress Chow asked, "Then, who is the terrifying murderer?" Ningshu raised her head and quietly looked at the calm, almost frightening person on the high platform. She said word by word, "That person is... it's me." A voice suddenly cut in, interrupting Ningshu's next words. Everyone turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. They saw the origin of these two stories, Yinruohui, silently appear at the end of the crowd. He was still wearing that hazy, unfathomable ink-colored robe. However, in the past, he was as gentle as jade in people's mouths. Now he was as heartless as he was disgusting. Exposed under thousands of torch-like eyes, Yinruohui took a deep breath, lowered his head and gritted his teeth. "Since Lady Ning has already exposed the plot of the female ghost's bloody letter, then I have nothing to hide. All of this was planned by me. I killed Lan Xiang and burned her body. The instigator of the Phoenix Terrace case was me, Yinruohui." "You?" Empress Chow frowned slightly and asked, "Why did you kill Lan Xiang?" Yinruohui laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "It's very simple. Just as Lady Ning said. I thought she was Nainu. The Nainu who knew that Yuzeo and I had a private vow to be together. Even though I, Yinruohui, am not a relative of the royal family, I am a talent that even the current prime minister has praised. I have an indescribably bright future ahead of me. On the other hand, Yuzeo is a lowly brothel girl, as lowly as a speck of dust. If anyone were to know that I had such an unbearable past with her, then my future as an official would be completely ruined. Therefore, I would never allow her to stay in the capital any longer. I would never allow her to get acquainted with more famous people in the capital, and become a weakness that could be used against me in the future. Thus, I warned her in private, but I didn't think that she would not know what was good for her and stubbornly persisted. I was afraid that she would expose what happened in the past, and then my reputation would be completely ruined. Therefore, I planned everything and secretly lured her out. I lured her into Phoenix Terrace and killed her in one blow. Then I disfigured her and burned her corpse. That way, no one would be able to recognize who she was. Then, I quickly rushed back to Moonluring Lake and pretended to be looking for someone, making up an alibi. That way, no one would suspect me. Only, I never thought that Cloud Leaf would appear at Moonluring Lake that night. I also never thought that he would have a conflict with the Ruan family's young master, and be thrown into Phoenix Terrace to see the entire process of me committing the crime. Although he was drunk at the time, who could guarantee that he wouldn't suddenly remember it one day? The great fear made it difficult for me to eat or sleep. Thus, in my desperation, I made the decision to poison him. because at the time he was busy with his marriage with Lady Ningxu and the name of your curse had already spread throughout the capital. It became the best cover for me to act. As expected, not long after, his body became worse and worse. Coincidentally, on the day of your wedding, he spat out a large mouthful of blood in front of everyone, becoming the proof that he was cursed by you. Ningxu's cold gaze fell onto his body as she questioned. Then why did you create this scene of a female ghost writing a blood letter in the Yin family? Chapter 112. Yin Ruahui said. In order to make this case more complicated and confusing, I created the impression that there really was a female ghost and wanted to scare you away. However, I didn't expect that my cleverness would backfire on me. Not only did I not scare you away, but I also made you follow the vine to get to the melon. It seemed like you were about to investigate the past, which made me very nervous. Thus, I immediately thought of another method, which was to use the legend of Empress Zhou on Phoenix Terrace to create the illusion that there was a female ghost who committed the crime. This would make you hesitate and completely confuse your train of thought. At this point, I have nothing to say. Your Majesty, please sentence me to death. However, all of this was done by me alone. Your Majesty, please don't implicate the people around me. Then why did you take care of Cloud Leaf all day long? Ningxu's gaze was like a mirror that could see through one's heart. It was reflected in Yin Ruahui's heart, causing him to involuntarily turn his head away. It was just an act. The more I took care of him, the less people would suspect me. Isn't that right? You're lying. If it was you who did it, you had a lot of opportunities to kill Cloudleaf directly. Then you would have no worries. Why did you use such a method like poisoning him? Perhaps it would leave behind endless troubles in the future. Ningxu mercilessly exposed his lie. Because first of all after all, he was my second brother who grew up with me. I really couldn't bear to kill him. I only wanted him to shut up, but there was no need to take his life. Secondly, if I killed him directly, it would definitely arouse more suspicion. That would be a mixture of truth and falsehood, making it more difficult for people to grasp. It would also be more convenient for me to hide. I've seen people who tried their best to escape punishment, but I've never seen someone who tried their best to take the blame for himself. Great young Master Yin, why do you have to do this? Ningxu couldn't help but sigh. If it was you who did it, then please tell me, how did you arrange the ghost shadow that appeared in front of thousands of people on Phoenix Terrace 10 days ago? Yin Ruahui was at a loss for words. Ningxu looked at him with pity and anger. She said, you can't say it because you didn't do it at all. From the beginning to the end, you were just a bystander who knew the truth, but couldn't do anything about it. The blood letters that appeared in the Yin family were indeed your doing, but it wasn't to frame the female ghost so that you could escape. Instead, it was to attract people's attention and focus everyone's attention on the cloud leaf poisoning. It would attract people to investigate and save the cloud leaf. At the same time, he warned the murderer to stop. But at this point, do you still expect her to have a shred of conscience? Don't hide it for her anymore. Do you know that she is hiding in the harem, ready to harm the next person at any time? However, even if you don't want to say it, your performance just now has already told many people that the murderer you want to hide is Yu Zhao, who is now the imperial concubine Ruan Qinghuan. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. On the high platform, the emperor's body shook. He subconsciously reached out to hold Consort Nguyen's hand, but just as he was about to hold it, he suddenly froze. He raised his hand and angrily pointed at Ningxu. How dare you, Ningxu? Do you know what you're saying? If Ningxu had just exposed Xiao Yinyan's crime, the people would have applauded and applauded. But now, her words were tantamount to provoking public anger. How is that possible? How could the imperial concubine be the murderer? She is the incarnation of Guanyin. Yes. What nonsense are you talking about? We don't believe it. We don't believe it. It must be you, this witch, talking nonsense and framing the imperial concubine. Chapter 113. Since the miracle of the bathing Buddha festival 4 months ago, Consort Nguyen was not just an ordinary concubine in the emperor's harem, but a godlike existence in the eyes of the people in the capital. At this moment, Ningxu had dragged their god down to the mortal world in front of so many people, and even branded her as a murderer. This was equivalent to trampling on their beliefs, ruthlessly trampling on them. In an instant, countless ferocious faces and spittle flooded towards her, wanting to drown her. Even though Ningxu had already mentally prepared herself, she still could not handle the sudden doubts of hundreds of thousands of people. She subconsciously looked towards a special spot in the crowd. The person who had always been calm and composed, and who did not care about anyone or anything, seemed to feel her lingering fear and hesitation. She raised her head, her light-colored lips slowly opened, and slowly spat out 2 words to her. "Don't be afraid." These 2 simple words seemed to be saying, "Even if millions of people are your enemy, I will stand by your side." Her rapidly beating heart gradually calmed down. Ningxu took a deep breath, raised her head, and fearlessly faced Consort Nguyen, who was smiling warmly like a bodhisattva on the stage. She continued her unfinished words. "As I said in the second case, there were 3 people who changed their magic at the same time. The first was Lan Xiang, who turned herself into Nainu. The second was eldest young Master Yun, who conjured a female ghost's blood letter to attract me to investigate the case. The third was the merciful savior, the incarnation of Guanyin, Consort Nguyen. She is the greatest illusionist among all of them." Ningxu called out, and Forsythia hurriedly carried a large ice bucket, huffing and puffing as she ran in from the crowd. She then carried out a 2-foot-long icicle from the bucket. The icicle's shape was very strange. It was shaped like a triangle, and it shone with a clear and bright light under the sun. Ningxu smiled. "Just now someone said that I, Ningxu, have a bad reputation. How could I be the incarnation of Guanyin? Actually, he was right. I really wasn't. As for the Buddha's light just now, it was merely a trick of mine. Please take a closer look." As the cursing gradually subsided, everyone looked over curiously. They saw Ningxu place the icicle under the sunlight. After a visual inspection, she adjusted the angle of the icicle. Soon, everyone was surprised to find that a magical 7-colored light shot out from the icicle and landed on the opposite corner of the wall. It was exceptionally clear. The commoners exclaimed, "It's really the 7-colored Buddha's light. Heavens, what the hell is going on?" Ningxu said slowly, "I once asked the most famous magic trick vendor in the East City about the secrets of magic tricks. He told me that the so-called magic tricks and illusions were nothing more than the use of camouflage and clever props to trick people's eyes. I also remembered that I once heard my father say that in the north, where there is a lot of ice and snow, people often find miracles. Because I looked up a lot of information, I finally made this special prop. After the sunlight enters the icicle, it refracts for the first time on the left side of the icicle, and then comes out from the inside of the icicle. The second refraction occurs on the right side of the icicle. After the sunlight is scattered, it is divided into different colors of light. It is especially obvious when it lands in the shadows." After she finished speaking, she turned her head to look at Consort Nguyen, who was quiet and kind like a bodhisattva, and smiled playfully. "Imperial Consort, do you think this magic trick is magical?" Consort Nguyen, who was standing in the shadows under the high platform, had an indifferent expression on her face. Since Lady Ning's miracles were man-made, then imperial consorts. Chapter 114. Noble Consort Ruan's flawless expression finally cracked a crack at this moment. Facing the emperor's questioning gaze, she trembled and touched her bulging belly. She slowly bent her knees and knelt in front of the emperor. When she raised her head again, 2 lines of tears fell down. "That's right, the miracle was indeed done by me." Her beautiful face was like a white peony that had been hit by rain. It was so beautiful that it made one's heart ache. But I also admired His Majesty, so I had no choice but to do it. 3 years ago, I, your concubine, received the decree to be selected and stepped into this Huang palace. The moment I saw His Majesty, I could not control my heart, and was unable to control myself. At that moment, I knew that the high and mighty, incomparably dignified man was the only person I could rely on in my life, and also the only god in my heart. However, there are really too many women in the palace. Every one of them is gorgeous and dazzling, every one of them has a prominent family background, and every one of them is more dazzling than me. In these 3 years, the number of times I saw His Majesty could be counted on one hand. I've paced back and forth outside your palace countless times, from dawn to late at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of you, but I've been driven away countless times. And I've even secretly watched you enter the palaces of other concubines countless times, smiling and speaking gently, but you've never once turned around to see that I'm right behind you. That kind of feeling really made my heart break. So I had no choice but to use an unconventional method and fake that miracle. At that time, my heart was nervous as if I was walking on the edge of a knife and in a sea of fire. I was afraid that if I failed, I would be smashed to pieces. But the moment His Majesty turned around and looked at me, I thought that even if I died, it would be worth it. If swords and spears were the weapons of warriors on the battlefield, then for a woman, tears were her best weapon. Moreover, this woman's stomach was carrying his child. In the end, the emperor couldn't bear it and reached out his hand to her. "Beloved concubine, why do you have to do this?" Consort Nguyen still refused to get up. She bit her lip and said, "Deceiving His Majesty is indeed my fault. My death is not regrettable. But if you say that I am a prostitute in disguise, that is simply a great injustice. This concubine will never admit it." Today was a rare good day. The golden crow above his head was unbridled and arrogant. The entire scene was deathly silent. No one dared to wade into this muddy water again, as they were deeply afraid that this continuous and incessant raging fire would burn them in the end. Only Xiaoqing, under the care of Jusi, calmly sat on the brocade seat. He lightly coughed twice, still lazily playing with the finger bone in his hand. He calmly opened his mouth and said, "Ning Shu, do you know that slandering the imperial consort is a capital offense?" Ning Shu bent her knees and bowed to him, as well as to everyone present. She said word by word, "I understand." "Then do you know that if you can't produce conclusive evidence, you might not be able to leave Phoenix Terrace alive today?" Replying to Your Highness, "If I was afraid of death, then I wouldn't have appeared on Phoenix Terrace today. As for the evidence..." Ning Shu carefully took out the old painting that was stained with blood from her sleeve and slowly opened it in front of everyone. It was truly an extremely beautiful painting. In the painting, there were 2 young women gently swinging on a swing. They were smiling sweetly and looked around. No one could recognize the younger one, but the slightly older one looked extremely similar to the imperial concubine. This imperial concubine Yang Yang, do you know where this little girl found this painting? In the arms of Ninu's corpse, the little sister that you once cared for. Even at the last moment, tightly held this painting of you and your sister in her arms, unwilling to let go. The moment she saw the painting, Consort Nguyen's expression stiffened. However, she quickly adjusted herself and coldly smiled. "What does where I found it have to do with me? Mayu has millions of people. It's not strange for there to be a few who look similar. If you want to associate me with some brothel courtesan just based on this painting, then that's simply the most absurd thing in the world. I remember that you just said that Miss Yuzeo had died in the hands of the bandits of Flame Breath Mountain, before she even stepped into the capital. Why are you now saying that she has become me? Isn't this contradictory? Moreover, my body hasn't been good since I was young. I was raised in Shaoyang's hometown, which is thousands of li away from Qingzhou. It's in a completely different direction. A few days after I returned to the capital, I was chosen to enter the palace as an imperial consort. What chance did I have to be replaced by someone else? Chapter 115. Nyang Nyang remembered incorrectly. I just said that the name Yuzeo died on Mount Yanxi, not her. I was also puzzled. When did you escape everyone's sight and steal the day? Until I found the list of people involved in the bloody massacre on Mount Yanxi 3 years ago. On the day that Yuzeo entered the capital through Mount Yanxi, the second young miss of the Ruan family, Ruan Qinghuan, also received the imperial decree to enter the palace and enter the capital in a carriage. This is really a great coincidence. What's more, the two of you look similar. And as you said, the second young miss of the Ruan family had been raised in Xiaoyang's old home. The servants who had taken care of her were all killed by the bandits on Mount Yanxi. No one can prove whether you are real or fake. Maybe it was an accident, or maybe it was for other reasons. No one would have thought that the inhumane massacre on Mount Yanxi was a death sentence for countless people, but it helped you imperceptibly. It turned you from a prostitute to the second young miss of the Ruan family, and finally, you became His Majesty's noble imperial concubine. Consort Nguyen sneered. She still proudly raised her chin, as if no one could crush her like this. Lady Ning, your ability to make up stories is really amazing. But these are all your conjectures. That's right, that day I did pass through Mount Yanxi with the servants to enter the capital, and I did encounter a disaster. But I luckily survived because of His Majesty's imperial blessing. As for the so-called body swap, it's ridiculous. Moreover, you said that I killed them. Let me ask you, I am a concubine in the imperial harem. Without His Majesty's decree, I can't leave the palace. Then how did I have the ability to clone myself and rush to Phoenix Terrace to kill and poison people? That's right, you can't leave the palace, but someone can. Ning Shu moved her gaze to another person beside Consort Nguyen. Fifth Princess, I heard you say that you have been dizzy and weak recently. Sometimes you are unconscious, sometimes you are restless. Is that so? Yes. The fifth princess was dumbfounded after witnessing the unfathomable revelations one after another. She stared blankly at Consort Nguyen, who used to be her most trusted person, and her face turned pale with fear. Could it be? Ning Shu slowly said. If my guess isn't wrong, the imperial concubine had already bribed the palace maid by your side. Every time she wanted to leave the palace, she would send that palace maid to give you a medicine that would make you unconscious. Then, she would secretly steal your token that allowed you to leave the palace at any time. She would disguise herself as you and openly walk out the palace gates. After killing people, she would openly return to the palace. Nobody would know. And this conjecture was confirmed when I witnessed the imperial concubine ordering the palace maid to give you the pill. After hearing Ning Shu's words, Fifth Princess felt a chill run down her spine, and a chill ran down her spine. She looked at the trembling palace maid beside her, and then looked at Consort Nguyen, who had been carefully asking after her not long ago. She took a few steps back, and simply didn't dare to face these two people. Because she admired Yin Ruahui, many people in the palace pointed at her and gossiped about her. Only Consort Nguyen supported her from beginning to end, and even encouraged her. Therefore, she had always treated her as a confidant and shared everything with her. However, she never thought that the person she had always treated as a confidant was using her from beginning to end. No, she was even harming her. She never thought that this person was actually the person who made her unable to obtain what she wanted, and almost fell into a trance. For a moment, she didn't know if she was more pitiful or more laughable. Suddenly, her stomach began to churn. She immediately turned around and spat out the pill. When she raised her head again, her face was already covered in tears. Her lips trembled as she looked coldly at the pale-faced Yinruohue below the high platform. She mocked herself. I Xiao Changyue am really blind in this life. Then, she raised her hand and fiercely slapped herself. Chapter 116. Empress Chao frowned slightly and said, So, the Phoenix Terrace case was really done by this B*TCH? But what was up with that ghostly figure? You said that the magic trick needed a prop, but that night, I ordered thousands of Yang Chengwei to search the entire Phoenix Terrace, but we couldn't find a single trace of a prop. How do you explain this? Ning Shu said. It's only natural that we couldn't find a prop, because this ghostly shadow magic trick was exactly the same as the miracle just now. It didn't use anything else but also ice. Were the guards who searched Phoenix Terrace with me that day present? Please describe the scene in Jiaxing Lu that night where the corpse was found. A bold guard immediately stood up and said loudly, That corpse was found in Jiaxing Lu, and it was hanging from the beam in the middle of Jiaxing Lu compared to Phoenix Terrace, which was completely burned to ruins. Jiaxing Lu wasn't that badly damaged. However, the doors and windows had long rotted away, so the place was empty and the wind was leaking everywhere. As soon as we went upstairs, we stepped into a pool of water by the doorstep. The water in the pool was especially cold. And that's all. That's enough. Ningxu bowed and thanked him. Thank you, little brother. Reporting to your majesty, the prop used in this ghostly shadow magic trick was 2 specially made ice cubes. One side was concave, and the other was convex. As she spoke, she picked up a branch and slowly drew the shape of the 2 ice cubes on the ground. Your majesty should remember that the ghostly shadow appeared in the evening, and there was only the last trace of the setting sun left in the sky. That trace of setting sun shone through the concave ice cubes, and the light gathered and shone on the corpse hanging in the middle of Zhaixing Lu. The light then spread through the other convex ice cubes, magnifying the ghostly shadow and casting it on Phoenix Terrace, which was shrouded in the shade of the trees, in front of all of us. When the guards came back to their senses to look for it, the person hiding in Zhaixing Lu immediately broke the 2 ice cubes. The large one was taken away, and the small ice cubes gradually melted. When the guards finally found it, it had already turned into a pool of cold water. It mixed with the sudden rainstorm from the day before, and no evidence was left. There were people in the crowd who had witnessed the ghostly act that day, and they immediately recalled the entire process. Yes, that's right. No wonder the ghostly shadow disappeared after the setting sun. So that's it. Ningxu raised her head and sighed, her eyes as bright as the stars. Your Majesty, if you had a little patience to listen to Lan Xiang speak the truth that night on Phoenix Terrace, instead of directly killing her, it's very likely that things wouldn't have come to this point. Or perhaps for months ago, if you hadn't been tempted by power and created that miracle to push yourself in front of the people, perhaps Lan Xiang wouldn't have had the chance to recognize you, and none of this would have happened. At this point, are you still not willing to admit your crimes? Consort Nguyen stiffly raised her head and looked at Ningxu, who was questioning her. She also looked at the Emperor, Empress Chao, and the tens of thousands of people who had been bewitched and deceived by her. At this moment, she was still so beautiful, like a blooming white hibiscus. But at the peak of its blooming, it was withering and rotting. She suddenly remembered 4 months ago, when the Buddha's light appeared, and the tens of thousands of people bowed to her. She also remembered how the Emperor had taken her hand in surprise and joy, and promoted her to consort on the spot. Step by step, she became consort. Only 1 step. In the end, only 1 step was left. A shocking series of major cases caused by a lowly courtesan on a pleasure boat ended with the collapse of the 3rd prince and Consort Nguyen. Because Consort Nguyen was pregnant with an imperial child, the emperor didn't immediately execute her. Instead, he banished her to the cold palace, waiting for her to give birth to a prince before dealing with her. But everyone knew that Consort Nguyen's reputation had completely collapsed. The entire imperial palace suffered a great purge. The hundreds of palace servants and eunuchs in Consort Nguyen's Qinghua Palace were all wiped out. Because of their negligence, the Yuan family was all banished to the border, never to return to the capital. As for Yunruahui, because he knew the truth, he didn't report it and was sent to prison to await his punishment. The April wind was warm everywhere, like the most tender stamen in a cluster of flower petals. It gently tickled the tips of the leaves, the blue ripples in the imperial garden, and the corners of the golden and glazed roof tiles. But for some reason, when it blew to the cold palace, it suddenly froze and became austere. In the empty cold palace, there wasn't a single palace servant. Only Consort Nguyen was still wearing the golden and pink robe embroidered with white hibiscus. She sat in front of a bronze mirror and drew her eyebrows, each stroke meticulously. As she drew, she looked at Ningxu in the bronze mirror and said softly, "Ningxu, if I knew you were so smart, I would have given you a cup of poisoned wine the day you entered the palace, to prevent future troubles. That way, I wouldn't have fallen into this situation." Chapter 117. Thank you, Nyang Nyang, for not killing me. Ningxu slowly bent her knees. She was wearing the same clothes as when they first met. The watercolored skirt fell on the tiles of the palace, like the ripples of fresh rain falling into a pond. And on the ripples, she was the clear and transparent raindrop. In the empty palace, Consort Nguyen's voice was especially cold. Do you believe that even if I am reduced to this state today, I still have 1,000 ways to make you lose your life here? With the dragon child in my belly, I will definitely rise again one day. This little girl believes. Then what did you come here for today to laugh at me? Ningxu shook her head. That's not it. This little girl came to ask Imperial Consort Nyang Nyang to bestow the antidote. Consort Nguyen laughed, and it was especially ear-piercing. Yes, Lan Xiang was indeed killed by me. But what antidote are you talking about? This consort doesn't understand at all. Nyang Nyang, you know, because there aren't many people in this world who can understand it better than you. Following her clear voice, 2 identical golden bracelets slowly slid out from her sleeves and appeared in front of Consort Nguyen. Several days ago, you sent people to burn the pleasure boat on Moon-Embracing Lake, causing this golden bracelet to sink to the bottom of the lake. At that time, a trace of doubt appeared in my heart. What kind of secret was hidden in this golden bracelet that made you so fearful? Thus, I secretly ordered people to fish it out, but there was only one golden bracelet, so I still couldn't understand its secret. It wasn't until I found the second one on Ninu's corpse that I finally solved the mystery. Her 10 fingers nimbly moved, connecting the 2 seemingly ordinary bracelets together. Then with a click, a jade tablet suddenly popped out from the connected bracelets. And that incomparably exquisite jade tablet actually had the word Zhou engraved on it. When she saw that word, noble Consort Ruan's impeccable expression, even when she admitted her guilt, suddenly cracked inch by inch. She completely collapsed. Take it away. Take it away. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it ever again. Ningxu only had her suspicions before she came. But now that she saw Consort Nguyen's expression, she knew that her guess was right. The character Zhou was Empress Zhou's character. Consort Nguyen covered her face in embarrassment. Tears flowed uncontrollably through the gaps between her fingers. Her whole body was trembling, like a delicate flower that was mercilessly snapped by the wind and rain. Do you know that all the sorrows in my life originated from this word? Because of this character, for as long as I can remember, my mother, little sister and I have always been hiding here and there. Have you ever seen a rat in a gutter? At that time, we were living a life worse than rats. We had to kowtow countless times to others in exchange for a mouthful of food. Later, mother fell ill and we had no choice but to sell ourselves to the brothel. But when I excitedly took the money and went back to find my mother, she had already breathed her last. You see, God is so fond of playing jokes on me. He played one huge joke after another. In your heart, a person who can even harm his own little sister must be a heinous beast. But do you know how it feels to be pressed on top of a 70 or 80-year-old scoundrel? At that time, I was so disgusted that I wanted to bite my tongue and commit suicide. But I didn't, because I knew that I still had a little sister. If I died, how would she continue to live in this world? So I lived on, like a walking corpse. Moreover, I carefully guarded that secret, struggling at death's door in this filthy world. I originally didn't want to tell anyone about it. I wanted to keep it with me until death, to be buried with me. But he appeared. He was in a daze, but he had such a warm smile on his face, like a jade. When he saw me, his face turned red. At that time, I even thought, could it be that all the suffering I suffered before was for the sake of meeting him one day? That was the most beautiful period of my life. Every day when I opened my eyes, I looked forward to seeing him. But while I was happy, I was also uneasy. I was afraid that if one day he found out that I was a remnant of the Zhou family, would he leave me because of this? During that time, I was tormented by these complex emotions every day, tormenting me to the point where I couldn't eat or sleep. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and told him everything. As expected, he left. For his family, he gave up on me. Ha 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 ha. Look, I was once again robbed of everything I worked so hard to obtain by this Zhou character. The rare time God cared for me was when I passed by Flame Breath Mountain on the way to the capital. The massacre had already ended. When I passed by the forest of corpses, I suddenly found that among the corpses, there was a young girl whose face was very similar to mine. According to the letter found on the young girl's body, I learned that she was the second young miss of the Ruan family and had been chosen to enter the capital. A thought suddenly appeared in my mind. Since God didn't give me everything I deserved, then I will personally steal it from God. Chapter 118. Ningshu already had a rough idea of what happened next. She didn't need to say anything. Looking at that beautiful yet pale face, Ningshu didn't know whether to hate her or pity her. So you chose Phoenix Terrace as the location? Yes. Why didn't I choose that place? I wanted to choose that place, the place that caused my Zhou family to fall from the ninth heaven to hell. Not only did I want to choose that place, I also wanted to make the plum blossom kiss appear in the world, and make it look like a vengeful spirit was causing trouble. I wanted everyone who harmed my Zhou family to be in fear. I wanted to see them live in fear until they finally kneel and beg me, treating me as the only Guanyin Bodhisattva who could save them. How satisfying! How satisfying! Looking at Consort and Wen, who had sunk into paranoia, Ningshu pursed her lips and said, "Then when you stabbed Nainu with the dagger, didn't you hesitate?" As if she had been slapped in the face, Consort and Wen opened her mouth but didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, she turned her head and hoarsely said, "In the past, I sacrificed myself for her. Now that I want her to repay me, what's wrong with that? Do you think I'm scary? What do you know? Everything I did was to restore my Zhou family's glory." She desperately tried to find an excuse for herself. I didn't really want to kill her, but I had no choice. I really had no choice. If her existence was discovered, then all my efforts would have been wasted. There's one thing you might not have guessed. Nainu knows that you're not dead. Consort and Wen's entire body trembled and she almost blurted out, "That's impossible." You might have forgotten, but at that time, Nainu was chosen to enter Prince Ku's residence to celebrate the imperial concubine's birthday. You also participated in that birthday banquet. You didn't recognize her because she had lost her voice while teaching Prince Ku how to sing, so she was sent to play the zither in a corner. However, she recognized you at a glance. She recognized the elder sister who had been with her day and night for more than 10 years, and who had taken care of her meticulously. But she didn't tell anyone. She only dared to secretly write a sentence in her letter to Lan Xiang. "Jiejie is doing well now, I'm relieved. You don't have to worry about me. Once I've saved enough money to redeem myself here, I'll return to Qing province and reunite with you." Unfortunately, she didn't manage to wait for that day as she fell into the third prince's evil hands. Actually, when she was captured by the third prince, as long as she gave the secret or the painting to the third prince, she probably wouldn't have to die. But she didn't do anything. From the beginning to the end, she never wanted to drag you down, even if she dies. The last sentence caused Consort and Wen to completely collapse. She hugged her head tightly and shook it with all her might. This is impossible. You're lying to me. You must be lying to me. I don't believe it. I absolutely don't believe it." The entire cold palace was filled with her miserable wails, as if someone had dug out her heart, and it was finally forcefully stuffed back in. The 7 emotions and 6 desires that belong to humans completely crushed her in an instant. She suddenly remembered 4 years ago, during the blooming season of the Devil's Snare flower. She and Nainu sat on the swing while he painted for them not far away. That girl had just grown up, but she had already learned how to tease people. She giggled as she leaned into her ear and said, "Jiejie, when you get married to young Master Yun in the future, I'll be your dowry maid." She was embarrassed and angry as she rebuked, "You wretched girl, how old are you? Do you know what marriage is?" That girl giggled and made funny faces at her. "Haha, I don't care, I don't care. In any case, I'll be your burden for the rest of my life." However, in the end, she had still lost her little burden. It wasn't until a long time later that her cries gradually stopped. Her voice had long been hoarse like a living dead. She clutched her chest tightly and paused between each word with incomparable difficulty and guilt. "When Nina died, was it painful?" Ningshu said softly. "It was painful. After she was cruelly tortured by the third prince, her entire body was cut hundreds of times. The tendons in her hands and legs were all severed. In the end, she died of blood loss. But it wasn't that painful because at least she didn't die in the hands of her most beloved sister." Chapter 119. Just as Ning Shu turned to leave, she heard Consort Nguyen say hoarsely behind her. That day, when I gave you the bracelet at the palace gate, I said that if I had a sister like you, I was sincere. I really envy you. If Nainu and I weren't born in the Zhou family, but in any other commoner's family, perhaps our ending would be completely different. I also wouldn't have become like this, where even I hate myself. The night was as cold as water, and the river of stars was desolate. Ning Shu placed the bracelet that Consort Nguyen gave her at the entrance of the cold palace. Then, she walked along the path she came from, step by step out of the world's most luxurious and loneliest birdcage. She walked out of the towering cinnabar palace walls, and walked past the resplendent golden glazed tiles. She let the palace lanterns cast their shadows one after another, slowly elongating her figure. It wasn't time to turn off the lights yet. She raised her head and looked at the thousands of lanterns flickering in the April wind along the way. Occasionally, a lantern would be blown out by the wind, but soon, a palace servant would run over and light it up again. Another gust of wind blew over, and the palace servant had no choice but to run for his life. On some palace roads, the palace servants who were in charge of the lights secretly took a nap, and several palace lanterns were extinguished without a sound, not even leaving a sigh. It was like countless souls struggling under the stars in the mortal world. In the darkness, she suddenly felt a trace of coldness. At the end of the palace road, a voice broke the ice wall that surrounded her. Why are you in a daze? The voice was like ice and jade knocking against each other, with a trace of impatience after waiting for a long time. She turned her head and looked in the direction of the voice. She saw a tall and slender figure standing under millions of stars, at the end of the waning lights. He was still wearing his cold black clothes, and his brocade-like black hair. However, under the reflection of the lantern in Jissee's hand behind him, there was a rare trace of warmth. The bone-chilling coldness in her heart had unknowingly melted away. She gathered her clothes and walked to his side step by step. I'm thinking about how great the magic power of power is, to be able to turn the woman who Yin Ruahue once said with a light smile into this unrecognizable person. He was also thinking about Nainu. 3 years ago, she narrowly escaped death and dragged herself all the way north to the capital to look for someone. If she knew in advance that her sister, whom she wholeheartedly trusted, would one day treat her as a stumbling block and kill her, would she regret it? There was also Lan Xiang. She had seen through the mysteries of heaven at the festival of bathing the Buddha. How could she not feel a trace of fear? But she still tried with a glimmer of hope. When she received the news, she couldn't wait a moment to rush to Phoenix Terrace for the appointment. How excited and hopeful must she have been? But before she could say a word, a dagger pierced through her heart. How would she feel at that time? The most difficult thing to understand in this world is the human heart. Nainu and Lan Xiang had both died to protect the people most important to them. It could be said that they got what they asked for. As for Consort Nguyen, even though she didn't die, she will spend the rest of her life in regret. For her, this might be the best punishment. He said calmly. What did she say about the plum blossom kiss? She said she would give me an answer in 3 days. Xia Hoqing nodded casually and said, Then let's go. The palace road was still the same cold palace road. The two of them walked side by side. Jiuxi held the palace lantern in his hand. The faint yellow light reflected the bright begonia painted on the lantern shade onto their clothes. Half of the light shone on his cloak embroidered with flowing clouds, and the other half on her rippling watercolored skirt. She tilted her head and blinked gently, teasing. Has your highness been waiting for me? Xia Hoqing's fingertips twitched slightly. He turned his head and smiled. You think too highly of yourself. Because of this case, His Majesty's old illness flared up again. He called me into the palace to accompany him. When I left the palace, I happened to pass by this place. It was just on the way. Ning Shu was speechless. This night, the sky was very high and very bright. In the dark blue silk-like curtain of night, one could see a string of Milky Way. Specks of starlight adorned the brocade, and under it, everything was plated with a layer of silver splendor. After not hearing Ning Shu's voice for a while, Xia Hoqing furrowed his brows and said, What nonsense are you thinking about now? Admiring the stars from thousands of years ago and the unpredictable changes above her head, Ningxu casually said, "I'm thinking about Ruan Chang'an. I'm afraid he never would have thought that his momentary hedonistic behavior would lead to such a shocking chain of major cases. In the end, it led to the destruction of his entire Ruan family. If he hadn't been so angry that he had listened to someone's instigation to throw the cloud leaf into Phoenix Terrace, allowing him to witness the entire process of Consort Nguyen's murder, and pulling the first wheel of this enormous wheel of fate, perhaps no one would have noticed that a little songstress on Moonluring Lake had been silently erased from this world. Then, there wouldn't have been such a series of events. Wait. A terrifying thought suddenly licked her heart like a poisonous snake's tongue, causing her to suddenly stop in her tracks. In this cold night, her entire body was terrified. Yes, if Ruan Chang and hadn't been instigated to do such a foolish thing. But who was the one who instigated Ruan Chang'an? Chao Huayu, the second son of Imperial Uncle Chao. Chapter 120. Countless scenes involuntarily flashed before her eyes. From the very beginning in the Phoenix Algae Palace, Empress Chao's flickering eyes flowed with deep thought. In front of Phoenix Terrace, Empress Chao bent down and whispered in her ear, "I don't accept the theory that ghosts are causing mischief. Someone must be causing mischief to my court." In the end, when the case was concluded and the 300,000 people respectfully sent the Empress back to the palace, Empress Chao lowered her head and gave her a rare and mysterious smile of praise as she passed by her. "You really didn't disappoint this Empress. Don't worry, this Empress will protect your life." This terrifying thought made Ningxu uncontrollably tremble. She subconsciously grabbed Xia Hoqing's sleeve and muttered, "The person controlling this case from beginning to end, could it be Chao?" Before she could finish speaking, Xia Hoqing suddenly pulled back his sleeve coldly. Then he raised his hand and gently pushed. Ningxu was completely unprepared. She felt her body go soft and with a splash, she fell into the side of the palace path, into the flowing lotus pond stream. The water of the April stream was cold to the heart. Fortunately, she was somewhat good at swimming and didn't choke to death. She struggled to stabilize her body on the slippery cobblestones at the bottom of the water. Hugging her soaked clothes, she looked up at the elegant person on the shore with his long belt fluttering in the wind. She angrily said, "What are you doing?" "It was like this again. It was like this again. Last time in the Sea of Fire, he was also like this." Without saying anything, he directly pushed her into the secret passage hidden in the Sea of Fire, causing her to be in a sorry state. This time, it was the same thing again. This person's bad taste was truly repulsive to the extreme. She pulled up her wet skirt and struggled to get onto the shore. Just as she was about to argue with him, she heard a series of even footsteps slowly approaching from the distance. Ningxu immediately looked in the direction of the voice and saw at the end of the serene palace path 16 palace lanterns clustered around a phoenix chariot in the center that looked like a blooming phoenix. It was slowly approaching her. Empress Chao, who was reclining on the phoenix sedan, still had that perfect and graceful smile on her face. Seeing Ningxu's drenched body, she was slightly startled inside. "Child, why are you so drenched? You're too rash. Although it's already late spring, it's still cold at night. Immediately come back with me and change into clean clothes to avoid catching a cold." Like a loving elder looking at his mischievous junior, he wanted to blame him but couldn't bear to do so. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. But the more she acted like this, the more Ningxu was terrified. The chill that had just been interrupted once again rushed to her back. Ningxu immediately knelt down and said, "This little girl greets the Empress." Reporting to Nyang, this little girl accidentally slipped and fell into the lotus stream. However, this little girl's body has been warm since childhood, so it's not a big deal to get wet. Many thanks for Nyang's care. She didn't know if it was because the night in the palace was too cold, or if the water in the palace was too cold, but the bone-chilling coldness seeped into each of her blood vessels. She did her best to keep herself calm. "Since it's like this, Ben Gong won't force you." Empress Chao smiled and gently turned the jade thumb ring inlaid with gems. "Your bravery in solving this case No matter if it's His Majesty or my court, you have done well. Ben Gong will remember this. Is there anything you want as a reward? The water droplets on her body dripped onto the dark palace tiles. Ning Shu bowed deeply. It's this little girl's duty to help His Majesty and Yang Yang. The truth of the case being revealed is this little girl's greatest reward. This little girl doesn't dare to have any other extravagant requests. Then has this case really ended? Empress Chao said slowly. In the sky above her head, a star that belonged to hundreds of millions of years ago suddenly flashed by, dragging the last trace of its life and briefly lighting up a small part of the sky. Ning Shu looked at that shooting star, and was stunned for a moment until a pebble lightly hit her back. Yes, she slowly said. The short moment of deep thought just now was just a sudden guess. Could she find any evidence? She couldn't. So she could only answer with this one word. Yes. Empress Chao smiled. In the deathly silence of the imperial palace, it was particularly clear. She bent down and slowly looked at Ning Shu, saying, Ning Shu, you really are a smart person, a very smart person. Since this is the case, Ben Gong is relieved. Chapter 121. It wasn't until the Empress's phoenix carriage slowly disappeared into the serene palace garden with high walls that Ning Shu felt her legs go numb. She couldn't use any strength. A jade white hand reached out from the side and landed in front of her. Ning Shu froze for a moment before raising her hand to take it. Because of his old illness, his body temperature was lower than normal people's, and so was his hand. But at this time, her entire body was cold. This slightly cold hand was the only warmth she could feel in this 1,000 palaces and 10,000 halls. Hundreds of feet of dangerous buildings. The strength she had just lost gradually came back. Using the strength of that hand, she finally stood up from the ground. The two hands held each other for a short moment before quickly letting go. Ning Shu sobbed for a moment before saying in embarrassment, Thank you, Your Highness. Although this person was not honest, he had saved her life, hadn't he? Before she could finish her last word, she saw him hold the hand that had just held her in the air for a long time. He pursed his lips deeply and then said to Jiuxi, Give me the handkerchief. Jiuxi immediately offered the handkerchief. Xiaoqing took it and in front of her, began to carefully wipe the hand that had held her hand from the palm to the back of the hand, and then to each finger. He didn't even let go of a single line on the palm. A spark flew to her heart. Ning Shu immediately became angry. She took a deep breath and was about to insult him. If Your Highness feels that your jade hand has been sullied by my daughter, there's no need to wipe it. It's better to just chop it clean. A thick black cloak flew towards her head. The faint fragrance of duheng carried a certain person's unique warmth. It entered her nose and then covered her entire body. The owner of the cloak wiped his hand clean, and was finally willing to be distracted. He casually said to her, No need to thank me. Remember, if you get sick from the cold, don't ask me for medical expenses. He continued to walk towards the palace gates with Jiuxi's support. With difficulty, she poked her head out of the cloak and looked at the person's tall and slender back under the moonlight. Ning Shu was angry, but she suddenly laughed. This person. It really was. That cloak was really too big for her. She held it tightly, but it still dragged on the ground. She had to be careful not to trip over the tail of the cloak. When she finally stepped out of the palace gate, Forsythia, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately greeted her. When she saw that her hair was wet and her body was dripping with water, she was shocked. Miss, what happened to you? She was draped in a black cloak that did not fit her at all. Again, taking a closer look, the black cloak looked somewhat familiar. Why did it look more and more like His Highness the Crown Prince? She was completely confused. However, the young Miss's health was more important. She hurriedly said, Young Miss, there is a set of spare clothes in the carriage. You should quickly get into the carriage and change. What if you catch a cold? By the way, I haven't put away the hand warmer for winter. Where did I put it? I have to find it quickly and cover it up for you. I remember that there is also a thick fox fur coat in the carriage. Seeing that Forsythia was so flustered that she was spinning like a top, Ning Shu was speechless. She smiled and said, It's no big deal. It's just a bit of water. I'll be fine after taking a hot bath back home. How can I be so delicate? Then she sneezed. Achoo. She was sick. She had been sick for 3 days. During these 3 days, several major events had happened. The first was that Yin Ruahui had committed suicide in prison. Before he died, he used his blood to write the word regret on the wall. Ning Shu woke up from her illness and immediately handed over a token to the palace and rushed to the cold palace. However, she was still a step too late. Consort Nguyen's corpse was already lying on the cold floor of the cold palace. Just like Lan Xiang, who had died on Phoenix Terrace, a dagger had been pierced through her heart. The blood that gushed out dyed her gold robe embroidered with white hibiscus red. It looked like a wedding robe that had been dyed in a hurry and hadn't been made yet. She clearly remembered that not long ago, this beautiful and ambitious woman had said in her ear, "With the dragon child in my belly, I will definitely make a comeback." But she was dead. She was dead. The coroner from the Jiangji Prefecture, the Supreme Court, and the Ministry of Justice confirmed that she had committed suicide. No one knew if she had heard the news of Yin Ruahui's suicide and chose to end her life in grief. In short, this woman, who had been manipulated beyond recognition by fate, had finally left the world that had never treated her well, and she had never treated her well. She had brought along the secret of the plum blossom kiss that she hadn't had time to tell. The only news that could be considered not bad was that Cloud Leaf, who had been unconscious for nearly a month, had suddenly woken up. The 4-petaled plum blossom on her neck had disappeared without a trace overnight. She had lost her memory and didn't know anything. Just as Empress Chow had requested, this case had truly come to an end. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.